In Jiang, by the reign of the Qian dynasty, people gathered in West Yutani to bring one man into the world of the dead. Those who knew him could not believe that he died such a terrible death. They bowed their heads as a sign of respect for the deceased. There was a tragic moment when the men had to spend their brother in the last way. Everyone was sad, standing opposite the coffin of the deceased. The inhabitants mentioned how he cut pigs skillfully, and with the honor they acknowledged that he was alive, West Yutan was flourishing. Now the craft of the butcher in their town can be considered dead, because there was no professional than Zhang Kui. In response to the sorrow of the audience, something in the coffin began to knock loudly, which was scared of everyone. Men as one, with nervous facial expressions, watched what was happening in their eyes. The upper part of the coffin flew into the air, and the pig's head and food on the table with a roar flew to the floor. The man, embraced by anger, began to formulate a terrible way from his recently awarded rooms. A little more, and Zhang Kui would really have died there from the lack of air. He did not understand how he found himself here. Looking at, the man found things near him for a funeral ritual and almost believed that zombie became. Many of the attendees began to flee frightenedly, believing that the demon was mounted in the corpse and now he wants to kill them. Only the subordinates believed in what they saw and shed tears of joy because the man survived. Prior to that, they believed that the fox was completely disapproved. Zhang Kui, breeding beard, and, looking at herself in the mirror, acknowledged that without it much better. The man remembered that he really died, but not in this place and in completely different circumstances. That evening, he heard a female cry for help. The man was not going to just walk past, so he went to the sound and saved the woman from the attacker. After the triumph, the rescuer told the poor man to flee, and himself also intended to leave the place. However, the striker did not want to put up with the defeat so much and sought revenge. He inserted a knife into the back of a man, emphasizing that if you stick your nose into other people's deeds, nothing good would work out. So Zhang Kui managed to degenerate in another world. Once again, looking at his appearance, the guy assumed that it was such a reward for his good deeds. However, this world was wrapped in darkness. The former owner of this body was completely disapproved by the fox. Here, every uncleanness is found, and people master flights on sword. It is a great empire where death at the hands of demons is a common matter. The ordinary people could not sit with their hands, so the emperor founded the noble organization of the Proscenian to combat evil. The reborn realized that this world is very dangerous, and who knows if it would eat it tomorrow. And perhaps to die in the arms of a fox werewolf is not so bad. However, our hero has such a death caused only an Echidine smile on his face. He did not want such an end. After reading in the past life, he knew that no protagonist, being reborn and falling into another era, could not do without the system. In this world, the boy's system was called 108 Transformations of the Spirits of the Sky and the Earth. The hero was convinced that no one would start learning from the evil ghosts of the earth, so he chose the sky. However, access to him was forbidden because it was a prerequisite to obtain an immortal body. Without a choice, the man was forced to start training from the spirits of the earth. After clicking on the scroll, his whole body was enveloped by a spooky aura. This was the essence of the ghost. At this time, a messenger with unpleasant news approached the courtyard. After learning that he was alive, people decided to turn to him for help. The subordinate touched the man's shoulder to attract his attention as he tried to recover from everything that happened. The messenger, which was also one of the subordinates of the yard, opened the door of the building and reported that there was a trouble in the city. Nayu's brother asked not to panic because their gentleman had just survived a terrible experience and was still frightened. There was a real tragedy. In the barn of the commander, the boar went down, ran outside, and rolled almost all pigs. The brother said that he would go to the rescue because the gentleman still needs a vacation and should not be disturbed. However, Zhang Kui did not consider it. Putting his hand on the shoulder of the subordinate, he asked to bring his sword. The battle with an evil spirit was a great opportunity to promote his skills. The boar not only killed pigs but also arranged chaos in the city, destroying furniture and food. People who were not fortunate enough to be nearby were threatened. Among them was a young woman with a young son. Seeing the angry look of the monster, the mother asked the baby to flee, but from fear, the son couldn't move. The inhabitants were scared and feared that these two would not have time to save from the tragic end. The monster dispersed and rushed to them. The woman hugged her son, trying to protect him. Fortunately, they were missed by a terrible fate, as Jung Kui's butcher key was protected from the boar. From the stories, he heard that the beast suddenly swept madness, and that could mean that the demon was inserted into his body. The man was not going to give a monster to escape and grabbing his horns. Squeezing his fist, the hero shouted that the demons were not allowed in this territory. His blow was so powerful that a bouquet of cracks was formed under the monster's head. All those present watched the skill shown by their gentleman. Jung Kui ordered the removal of the territory, and the killed pigs divide between those who were injured. Men with delight called him a true hero. The saved boy addressed the man with the desire to express his gratitude. The woman lifted the boy in her arms so that he could stretch sweets on a skewer as a gift. However, the man proudly said that everything is normal and he should not thank. The inhabitants were amazed and believed that their gentleman was a real hero. Jung Kui, leaving the place of fight, was going to go to his rooms to rest for a little. However, somewhat made him stop for a moment, reminding him of health problems with the former owner. The guy completely forgot that his predecessor has a malfunctioning of the kidneys, so his face strain on pain. The subordinates immediately guessed what was the matter. They could never think that such a valiant master may have problems with men's health. These words were angry with the guy, so he immediately gave everyone a whistle and said that instead of chatting, they would be better looking for a good doctor. The night came, and the young gentleman went to rest from a hard day to his room in the palace. There he thought that the real cause of death of his predecessor was renal failure. After all, when the fox reached the man, he was already disinfected, so it was not surprising that he died so quickly. The hero understood that first of all, he needed to understand what the spirits of heaven and earth were. Therefore, he returned to the scrolls of the spirits of the earth, who, after the rebirth, tried to master. There he learned about the skill he now has. Life energy regulates breathing, increases body strength by 5%, and slowly restores wounds, spending 2 points of mana per second. When the man opened the scroll of the spirit of the earth, the Taoyin technique appeared, within which 72 transformations of the spirits of the earth, the art of yin-yang, and 5 elements were hidden. Now she was on the first level. Skill points can be obtained for the murder of demons. It was a plus, because in the past life, the guy hated crime and seemed to understand the system very well. Now the hero can travel through this world with a sword in his hands. He was wondering if he would be able to master the flight in the future. The fire of candles standing near the windows suddenly flashed, reporting that something had made their way into the room. The man immediately felt dangerous and grabbed his sword, preparing to defend himself. He asked who died into his room. A woman with an attractive appearance turned to the hero, asking how he remained alive. He immediately guessed who it was. It was the same fox who killed his predecessor. The man suggested that she had come to use him again, and with all his strength swung a blade. Such a reaction caused a fox werewolf only a smile and a bold look. She was not going to flee or defend himself, but only quietly continued to sit on the windowsill. The fox lifted her finger to her lips and answered the man that he was too impatient. The hero cut her body in half, but it had no effect, because her figure was just dispelled in the air. Undoubtedly, this woman was a real demon, and it is impossible to predict what more antics she can show. The fox began to tickle the boy's body with her tail. He tried to reflect anything, but didn't work. The hero waved his sword, trying to avoid touching, but for the demon, it was unsuccessful. Jung Kui realized that human power was not enough to resist it. If he knew the technique of 72 transformations of the spirit of the earth, he would have had a chance to overcome it. The body of Damosa began to materialize back. She assured the boy that she would not harm him. When she heard about the resurrection of her husband, she was quite happy. The woman said that he loved him, because otherwise he would not have been with him all these months and would not collect wild ginseng. Jung Kui was convinced that it was all a delusion because it was obvious that she just ate his body. Having embarrassed, the girl replied that he was really right. Then she looked at the physique of a man and blushed. The butcher leaned the sword closer to the body and ordered the Demades not to approach it. After casting a full moon, the woman replied that she should not be afraid because she would go. The beauty came to say goodbye because she goes to improve deep into the mountains. She believed that the next time they would see in hundreds of years when the guy reborn and would not remember her. After these words, the woman turned into the spirit of the fox. Finally, West Yuitan was in danger and Jung Kui should leave this place. Before leaving, Demos also asked the boy to remember her name, Humanian. The hero asked her to tell everything she knew, but the woman had already left the place. Finally, the fox only had to mention the grave of the general, leaving an angry boy in confusion. The next morning, Zhang Kui went out into the yard and started with workouts to increase body strength. The butcher practiced the technique of strokes, but was still tired of pain in the belt, which was wrapped in bandages. The hero could not remain calm because of his ignorance. He did not know what to do with information about the grave of the general. After the morning ritual, the man went to the yard where his subordinates trained. They were excited because of the health of their master, so they tried in every possible way to find out how he feels. Zhang Kui came here to find out if there was a general's grave near the tomb. However, the subordinates did not know anything about it and could not understand who he was talking about. This should be expected from a pile of fools that could only boast of their physique. The gentleman ordered the lie teacher to call, because before that he heard that he was the only educated man here. Libokian was a school teacher West Yuitan. He knew that erudite and educated people needed everywhere. Zhang Kui's subordinates penetrated his home, saying that their gentleman wanted to meet her husband. Such news did not please him at all, the teacher asked, or really said. Lei stubbornly replied that he was not going to go to the master's possession and turned his back. However, the men were indifferent to what he wanted there. They grabbed him and forcefully took him to Zhang Kui. Returning to the estate, the subordinates reported that they executed the order and brought the lie teacher. Zhang Kui, sitting on a chair, propsing his face with his hand, pointed out a waiting look at the man. He poured a guest into a bowl of water, assuring that he could relax because he had already given his fools a few lessons. Zhang Kui announced that he invited the teacher because he wanted to know something and reported what the news came to him. The face of Li frozen, hearing from the master that, on the side of the outskirts of the grave of General West Yuitan, a great danger was threatened. Zhang Kui asked in a serious tone if the man was known about the history of this grave. The whole body of the teacher was shaking, and he once again asked if he heard about the grave of the general. He was not specifically aware that it was for the grave, but he still made certain guesses about her. He reported that there was one case once, but there was never a general. However, Li teacher was sure that it was not a legend, and the grave really exists. And then he began his story. 100 years ago, there was one local bully, which became a senior yard. His name was Li Yan. He was cunning and insidious, was able to cling to the strong people, then at the hearth, so soon he became a favorite in the imperial yard. By deception, the boy managed to assign himself the title of general, which caused people only ridicule. Li Yan dreamed of leading the temple to glorify himself and his ancestors. But in response to his plan, the ordinary people of Wesa only ridiculed him. As a result, no one was ever removed on the grave of the senior yard. He did not think and even thought and went to the toilet. Even the teacher sinned so. The man was castrated. He never headed the temple, and now people have defiled his grave. Zhang Kui was smiling that the deceased has accumulated a lot of image on the population. Before leaving, the teacher said that the problem could be solved. He was going to contact the head of Westa so that he would send to the outskirts of the fighters of demons. According to the memories of the predecessor, the noble organization of the Proscenian quenches evil throughout the country. However, Humanian has not in vain warned that West Yutan was threatening a great danger. Zhang Kui could not believe that a 100-year zombie was able to commit something scary. He was convinced that something was wrong in this situation, and when he got up from the place, he called to himself Nuye. Surprised by this mood of his master, the man asked if everything was okay and whether he was calling him. The hero reported that he collects a detachment and he needed everyone to go to the city tomorrow to kill pigs. Nuye asked the man if he would really leave his bench unattended. Zhang Kui replied that in 2 days nothing would happen and it is necessary to go with him. At night, the man was sitting in his estate trying to practice recently acquired skills. Over time, he learned about another technique that turns the spirits of the earth into the spirits of the sky, blesses weapons and body, allows damage to material creatures, spends 2 points of mana per second. Zhang Kui realized that he would definitely need to gain this skill, but he had not enough points. So the hero decided that it was worth going to hunt. Meanwhile, one man wandered through the outskirts, turning to the air to ignite the flames and save the houses from unclean. As a result, he reached the forest, which was enveloped in a thick fog, which came from where? From under the cover of the night, there appeared perfume and armor that surrounded the unhappy man. One of them swung the sword and cut his body into pieces. The entrance to the forest became the death site of the unhappy. Meanwhile, a man was actively collecting carts near the buttock to go on the road. Nuier announced the Lord that yesterday the teacher Luce reported all the head of the Wester, and the organization of Zitidian would arrive in a place in a few days. Looking at the boys, he wondered if they really should go to that place. Zhang Kui replied in a serious tone that they needed to go to General's grave. In the novels of the priest genre, which he read in the past life, it was mentioned that fog is a sign of demons, so they should rush. When all the carts were ready, the detachment of the master went through the city to get to the forest. Entering there, men immediately had a serious problem, which was difficult to move on. The whole territory was wrapped in thick fog, so it was unrealistic to see the road. While the detachment was moving forward, they were watched from the tops of trees at this time, which were now the perfect hiding place. There were evil demons in knightly armor, which had recently killed a man. The commander ordered the armed and wrapped in the patches of dead bodies of dead soldiers to shove the sun with banners and lining rows in all directions. For a moment, all the men pierced a terrible feeling that caused ants on the back. They immediately realized that in the middle of the fog was hiding evil and became more careful. Zhang Kui was aware that his detachment is in a bad position and they needed to return to the city to wait for sunlight. The man told his subordinates that yesterday's event was 1,000 kilometers, so today the sun should shine even brighter. He ordered everyone to retreat, emphasizing that it was worth returning here for lunch. Zhang Kui hoped that he did everything right. The hero felt it was not an ordinary fog. Several hours passed, but the trees did not disappear, which indicated that the detachment still did not seem to get out of the forest. They have not yet reached the Yuitan's Wizadi, which could mean that they were being driven. Suddenly the fog over their heads began to change color from grey to black. Zhang Kui stood on a cart so that it is better visible in the neighborhood. The man began to look at the sides, watching what was happening. The fog has changed its color and structure everywhere. The butcher did not understand what was happening here at all. The trees began to see the silhouettes of zombies in armor that surrounded the entire detachment of the Lord. The fog became just thicker and enveloped the outskirts of the forest in complete darkness, which could prevent the enemies. The captain of the detachment descended from the cart to the ground and ordered the subordinates to light the torches as soon as possible. They heard the boss and began to execute his order, setting fire to everything that was in their hand. Zhang Kui told him to give it to him and aggressively grabbed the first burned torch from the palms of Nuier. The man swung him and through the forest, not telling everyone to follow the fire. Arriving where the fire stopped, the men were extremely surprised by what they saw. There were armed skeletons of corpses of women and men who repeated the same phrase about warriors. The runny nose went forward, going to attack the residents of Wester Yuitan. Zhang Kui realized that they had no other choice but to take the fight from evil monsters. The first skeleton in the armor approached the master, directing a wooden spear with an iron tip. The butcher reached the sword, going to test his hand at the first enemy. The blade slipped out of the cover and the hero was going to fight. He evaded the impact and the spear below at the hand of the skeleton. Going closer, Zhang Kui swung and flew the body of the enemy in half. The man was glad that he managed to defeat the first monster. He enthusiastically continued to destroy all the next ones, emphasizing that he would kill them faster than them. As a result of the victories for each skeleton, he was added 1 score of skills. The young man rejoiced in every victory and continued to think that a further fight would also be easy. However, it was because of this that he lost his vigilance and did not immediately feel that several spears were flying on one side. The man realized this when it was too late, and there was no time to evade the attack. He did not believe that everything would end in this way because only recently reborn in this world and did not have time to find out about him. However, he had the most devoted subordinate to the spears, giving his body a sacrifice to protect the master. What just happened in the eyes of a man was extremely puzzling. He could not believe that he had lost Nuier because of hesitation. Behind his body were visible figures of scraped skeletons, which were approaching closer and closer. Other subordinates were not a better fate. They begged the Lord to flee, protecting him from skeletons. Bloods occurred directly in his eyes, and in the soul began to ignite a lot of anger. The body of the man engulfed a storm of emotions. He wanted to revenge for his comrades and was about to use his techniques of spirits. He was discovered with a new skill that allowed to transform the spirit of the earth into the spirits of the sky, blessed weapons and body, made it possible to damage all creatures, spending 2 points in a second. The angry guy clenched his fists and went to the murderers of his comrades, saying revenge. One by one, he destroyed evil demons in armor, cutting through their bodies through. For each killed monster, he continued to accrue skills, which allowed the use of equipment further. Now the man could open the comprehension of Yin-Yang's eyes. He has the ability to see the invisible realms of creatures. Zhang Kui looked around and found that there were many enemies, and they surrounded him from all sides. But it was not scared of the guy at all. He ordered them to attack everyone if they wanted to die faster. There was a knock of a hoof nearby, and even a crowd of skeletons paid attention and looked back. Another demon in a dead horse armor arrived on the battlefield, behind which a blue flag was visible. But the mood of the butcher did not change from this. On the contrary, he suggested that the arrived skeletal to get acquainted. He uninhabited the name Jia Ding. The man began to approach the enemy, emphasizing that the appearance is quite spectacular. Squeezing his fist, he jumped into the air, going to smear his empty head. The butcher was going to strike a powerful blow, but he failed to make his intentions. Missed. All because the enemy reacted in time, rejected the horse and put his spear. The man barely had time to evade the next threat from the evil demon, which also attacked him. The spear was a serious problem, so the hero understood that first of all, it was necessary to get rid of him. He began to pursue a thief who favored a distance than a battle. Zhang Kui shouted that hiding was all that the damned demon was capable of, and thus lodged it. As a result, the monster was inserting the spear in the shoulder of the man, but it was exactly what he achieved. This weakened the enemy's mobility and allowed the guy to finally pay for his comrades. The evil demon fell from the horse to the ground, where the figure of the falling meatball appeared in front of him. He was frightened and, recognizing defeat, was going to escape, but the guy could not allow him to allow him. The reborn hero took his head, shouting that he was for him for his murdered comrades. The angry monsters rose from their seats and began to move towards where they won one of their leaders. They gradually began to surround the guy on all sides, approaching closer and closer. The wound in the shoulder has become more bleeding, and the pain from it covered every centimeter of the body. However, the frantic release of adrenaline partially quenched the weakness, and the guy was not going to give up to these monsters. They became even more than before, and those who were overcome went to their feet and went to battle. Suddenly, a cry of birds informed about trouble. The sky was blackened, and the clouds began to disappear in part. Suddenly, the surrounding area enveloped the earthquake. The whole city behind the woods for a moment shuddered at the powerful explosive wave, sweeping everything in its path. It spread everywhere. The bodies of skeletons, which flew in different directions from the shockwave, testified. In seconds, the explosion also reached the guy who tried to hold on his feet, crossing his hands in front of his face. From a powerful sound from his ears and nose, blood began to flow, and it became more and more difficult to stay in place. The young man could not even imagine that it was an ancient evil capable of breaking human viscerators into shreds. The sound became stronger, and the strength to resist the boy did not remain, so his body was thrown back. He crashed into one of the trees that remained whole after such a wave of great power. Coming to consciousness, the hero found that all the evil spirits had disappeared somewhere, leaving only the bones behind. He was incredibly angry, thinking that they went from there in someone's footsteps. The bodies of the dead comrades lay throughout the field of battle, both on the ground and on the trees. Zhang Kui felt pathetic. He promised that the day would come when he could take revenge for them. The hero was contemptuous of this world, in which there was a system of beauty, wealth, comrades. All this was just an illusion. The man understood that now it is not time to think about his dead subordinates. He remembered all the times and moments that he had to spend with them, and what support they were always for him. Meanwhile, two people on horseback were in a hurry near the forest. The student asked the mentor what was such a hurry. He answered to eat. He knew that evil attacked this place, and the organization of the Pintian would only arrive in 2 days, so they needed to find at least some money. The girl thought that the guards were obliged to destroy any evilness, and was disturbed by the fact that they were noticeably relaxed. The master knew that they were only able to boast because if they could ensure the safety of the whole state, why didn't they decide to contact the demons? He was certain that the organization would only be puddling of the people. In addition, it is not known why the general is destroying the city. The old man thought it was not their business because he just needed money. And the place where evil has become infertile, demons are not found there. Under a strong thunderstorm, they reached a place where a clash between people and unclean has recently occurred. There, Zhang Kuai was sitting over the bodies of dead comrades whose whole body was filled with blood spots. The hero heard the horses and looked around to find out who came to the forest. It could be guessed by which he had passed. Looking at him, the master and his student at first were incredibly frightened, not only from his appearance, but also from the situation. The Zhang Kui threw on them was the last movement that made before losing consciousness. Then he began to fall to the ground. The old man said done that they need to save this guy. At night, all tired and bandaged, a man woke up from a nightmare that he had dreamed. He began to inspect the area in which he was. There were wooden beams and beaten jugs with water. And also, there was a dilapidated and sometimes beaten, headed figure of Buddha and shreds of fabric hanging from the ceiling. Considering on a dilapidated roof, the wounded butcher tried to understand where he was. A master with a student returned to the building. Dun was glad because they really got rich this time. That's what meant to follow the mentor. Zhang Kui has heard their conversation, as well as that they will soon need to leave this place because the price will arrive here. Entering the building and seeing that the rescued guy had come to his senses, Dun was very happy. After bowing his head, Zhang Kui introduced himself and thanked them for saving him. The master was also glad that the stranger came to his senses, so he called in response. The old name was Liu Mao, and his student was Li Dun. The man noticed that Zhang Kui is local, and that is why he barely managed to escape from the general's tomb. These words gave the guy hope, and he immediately began to ask what they knew about the incident. Liu Mao replied that he knew something, but he emphasized that he did not conduct unprofitable cases, so information about the grave will cost 100 loons, the rescue of the boy, 420, 3 pans, and 5 this. Dun took into account that the guy lost loved ones, so she said that he could take out 0 from this amount and pay 520, 3 flags, and 5 this. But Zhang Kui did not understand her logic. The old man asked the butcher whether he thought that his life was not worth such money and also noted that he had buried his comrades. The last phrase had a special impact on Zhang Kui. He was not going to give up their proposal. The man tilted his head and said he was ready to pay 1,000 flags for it. But first, he needed to get home. The teacher shouted in response that if the guy goes home now, then he would die, because the warriors of the Pintian did not go from there. Dun considered such a warning strange because the organization should fight evil. The old man asked the girl how she thinks. What is the real cause of the atrocities of the unclean? But after that he answered, the destruction of eyewitnesses. The fewer people know about the attacks of demons, the better. At first, Zhang Kui believed that he was receiving peace here, but now he was convinced that in this place everything was going on in human bones. At dawn, the rescuers led the guy to the place where his comrades were buried. Dun, with sad notes in her voice, reported Zhang Kui that West Yutan was completely destroyed by a sound wave. And this meant that the guy could not afford now to buy information about the grave of the general. The old man offered him an agreement. If he worked for him to pay his debt, he will be able to raise money and pay for it. Zhang Kui began to pour water from the jug on the ground where his comrades were buried. Then he threw a vessel on the ground, which flew into pieces with a crash. It was a kind of ritual of farewell to the dead. The man now had to work on the LUI master, so when he was leaving this place, he asked where they would go now. The old man replied that this world is huge, and where the butcher wanted, their path would stretch there. The course of events is transferred to Sishai, a small village with a crossing, which uses the benefits of the North-South Water Canal. People at the local bar talked that in the river Yuitan, which was located in the Zichidzian district, the sky suddenly darkened. They heard that a sinister creature, turned into red armor, appeared from many clouds. It was said that a creepy creature was 25 meters wide in height. Everyone listened to a stranger with surprise about how a monster splashed a flame. The owner of the establishment did not like such conversations, so he expelled all the drunkards that bred these hums. Men from the outside saw a cruel attitude to their comrades and wanted to go to seek. However, their distraction is a wonderful voice that turned to everyone to announce some news. A man with a fan in his hands said that this year his mountain estate, Tianin, strongly seeks to receive a pill of desire. Everyone was surprised that the unique Mr. Silverblade also arrived in this place. Residents realized that if Tianin's estate intervened, they could not count on anything. Some from the crowd said that with such a great soul as the master, you cannot be afraid of overeating. These exclamations also heard Zhang Kui, Li Dun, and their master, who watched nearby. The girl admired the unsurpassed beauty of the silver blade. She believed that the lady who would marry him would be very lucky. From the crowd, they heard the mockery of the Lord, which were extremely cheered by Zhang Kui, but caused great anger in Dun. She did not like that he supports the abuse of handsome men, although he himself looks like a giant bear and is also considered a nobleman. The young man asked to stop and promised that he would not offend her idola. But Dun heard this word for the first time. She was curious, so she wanted to find out about its meaning. The man said, quite vague and restrained, that idol is a long forgotten phenomenon. The master asked the students to finish Teraven because it was time to go. The victim's family was waiting for them. When Zhang Kui entered the tavern, everyone was thinking if this guy who looked like a devil in the flesh also came just to play bone. It was known that the pill desire for 10 years, so it is not surprising that there are many who want to get it. The arrivals tried to walk quietly by the crowd and watch the silver blade, but the physique of the boy and the passion of Dun attracted too much attention. Zhang Kui asked the old man whether the pill desire was really not interested in him. The master was sure that many would like to extend their lives, but it was not always worth it. He asked the guy a provocative question. If he is able to kill demons, or is it ready to devote himself to this craft? The man noted that in Janhu, things are much more difficult than they seem at first glance. The hero agreed with the teacher's opinion because, first of all, it is necessary to get rid of evil. Zhang Kui, having lost everything, together with the master, formed a small team for destroying demons, starting with the Yu County. Liu Ma and his student can make money on this, and the guy can gather enough skills, in which case everyone will receive their own. The group approached one temple and began to consider its statues. The wild before them was given by the imperial court. A few years ago, there was a trouble in the north. Yu Gaishan decided to organize food transportation, but the losses were huge. Therefore, everything I had to do is build a memorial. Hearing this story, Dun thought that the ruler was a good person. However, the old man did not think so. This statue just demonstrated the status of the emperor in Jianggu, and ordinary people simply did not want to call for themselves. Zhang Kui suggested that by a sincere desire to help get rid of the consequences of natural disasters is hidden something really. But it was no longer their business, because now they were interested in making money for the destruction of demons. The group opened the gate and entered the yard where they were stopped by the guard, asking what they needed. The old man asked to notify the head of this house that came people who drive away evil. The men were a little nervous and asked to wait for them to announce the Lord. The yard of the house was incredibly beautiful. It flowed a small river surrounded by rocks, and that was enough to look like a full garden. To meet the guests came a man who managed the household of the residents of Yui. He asked to follow him, assuring that the gentleman would be very pleased with their visit. Yu Gaishan tilted his head in respect and congratulated the monks who came to his yard. He announced that many people had already visited them. Even people from the price came. However, with sadness in his voice, he said that none of them could help his son. Zhang Kui suggested that if the emperor met them personally, it seems that his child is really in great trouble. The man stopped sharply and turned to the guests to ask where they came from. The old man began to be nervous because of such a reaction, because it was likely that the emperor suspected something. Zhang Kui asked if they really mattered where they were and how they were being improved. He stressed that the man shows them his son as soon as possible. Yu listened carefully to the words that the monk would solve his problem and let him just pay him money. The manager did not understand what they were allowed, and Eloise and Dun began to be sad because they could lose hope because of this fool to get money and new preciousness. The reaction of the emperor was not at all as everyone expected. He said that all the predecessors promised to help, but one was worse than the other, so he liked the combat mood of these fun. Zhang Kui was even a little surprised by these words and followed the emperor. Subsequently, the man led the fighters of demons to the building where his son was kept under the lock. Inviting them inside, he reported that the guy had previously been very polite, and others considered him a noble man. The son began to scold his old man because he again brought some puzzles. But he threatened that when he gets out, he would go all. After the guy had an inferred demon, he not only crazy, but also tried to rape one of the concubines. Everyone who came argued that he was not obsessed, but the emperor believed that it was not. Li Dun turned to the partner and asked if he noticed something unusual. Zhang Kui replied that the son of the emperor was truly obsessed, but the demon was quite difficult. The man stressed that it would be quite difficult to cope with this unclean. The emperor, in despair, asked if they could cope with it and save his child. Zhang Kui asked everyone to move away, and he went closer to inspect the obsessed. The son of the emperor scolded the boy and demanded that he did not step a step. The former butcher used his power to find out which demon sat in the boy's body. After the examination, he realized that the things were quite bad here. The uncleanness inside the son of the emperor is connected with his heart. It is easy to kill it, but it will be difficult to save the life of the obsession. The man began to beg the monk so that he would save his child, assuring that he would be very grateful to him. Zhang Kui replied that he needed to come up with a way and sat down to make a little distinguished. The man understood that in such a situation it could only turn to the technique of spirits of the earth. The accumulated points for the murder of the leader of the undead in the forest and several soldiers, the guy spent on improving the technique of Taolins to the second level, and now he has only 1 point. The improved skill regulated breathing in vital energy, increased the body strength by 7%, and slowly heal wounds. Zhang Kui realized that if it was wrong, then everything would be over. This time, he had to use 3 techniques: illumination that released a spiritual glow, protecting the body; written spells that gave him a base for their development. Also, the man chose the skill of the world in the jug, where 1 cubic meter of space became the size of a grain. The selected spells had nothing to do with the former life and were not related to the 3 supreme deities, demonic forces, or non-residents. And this could indicate that the connection with the former world was already fully broken. Coming to consciousness, Zhang Kui ordered the emperor to bring him a delicious yellow paper and a cinema if he wanted to save his son as soon as possible. A minute later, the man found everything he needed in his yard and brought a monk for the ritual. He was worried because the quality could be improper, and the guest said that it would be suitable. The emperor also was very worried that it could be a hasty solution to solve the problem. The technique of written spells is unsurpassed. After the inscription is ready, the paper immediately lights up. The hero hoped to do everything right. After the painting, Zhang Kui threw the brush back and ordered him to bring a bowl of water. He threw a burning piece of paper into the bowl and ordered the drink to drink this liquid. The farm manager approached the young gentleman and apologized in advance, pouring this water into his mouth. The emperor looked up at home, hoping that it would help save his son. The former butcher's teammates also patiently expected what would happen afterwards. From the body, Wencheng began to see a mud monster, which made him get in pain. Zhang Kui asked the audience not to approach the guy, emphasizing that he had to finish the case. He painted another piece of paper and instructed the emperor's son to drink this water once again. Everyone was looking forward to whether it would work and whether the boy would be able to save. Looking at Wencheng, the monk announced that now the problem is solved, and with the son of the emperor, all is well. "You approached the guy and asked how he feels now," he said with his father's name. He was very sorry that he behaved so horribly because he did not understand what he was doing. The emperor said that everything is behind, and now the man needs a rest. Yu bowed to the rescuer and promised that their genus would never forget his noble act. The ruler invited them to stay for a few days as guests. The partners were also glad. Zhang Kui suspected that hospitality is just formality, and the emperor is simply afraid that his son's disease would return again. The man was alert and saw that the monster had flashed behind the rescued, so he has no other choice but to stay for a while to find out what he conceived. Arriving in temporary housing, the old man very much thanked the guy, because it is the best place where he ever stopped. Zhang Kui wondered where Dun is now and learned that today the meeting of the Celestial Eagle would take place today. So, Yu Gaishan decided to organize a solemn banquet. As soon as the girl heard it, she immediately ran to love the young gentleman. The hero guessed that it was about a silver blade. The master surprised such a nickname. He could not understand what the nobleman thought when he chose him. Zhang Kui heard that there may be things in the city that continue life and asked the old man why he did not go, although he guessed that he was not particularly interested. Liu Mao said that when he was young, Jianchu was very impressed. He dreamed of glory all day, but he was not the best. Such things of people of his age are no longer worried. The old man was only dreaming of his cozy place, where you cannot think of tomorrow. In this world, there was cultivation, and the boy had a system. Zhang Kui was convinced that the day would come when he would end with the general's grave. Most of all, he sought revenge for his fallen comrades, who defended him from death at the cost of his own life. The guy thought he would ever go right for a month and believed that there would be a lunar legend castle. Above the roofs of the buildings of the emperor's courtyard, the same monster flew that recently controlled the body of his son. Zhang Kui was near the window and immediately noticed his presence because he was waiting. The demon sliding from the roof and headed to the door of one of the buildings, although he did not know that he had remained noticed. He penetrated the son of the emperor, where he still rested after everything that happened. The insidious monster pulled his hand to his body in order to capture control again. However, his plans were not destined to come true. Zhang Kui cut his dirty palm with one wave of the sword. The monk was interested in hiding this monster behind the hood, so he ordered him to be removed and appeared. The monster in response only mutilated something incomprehensible, but clearly had no intention of fulfilling the request of the man. It began to move back with intentions to escape. The monk did not like that the demon refused to remove the hood, so the man promised that he would take off his self along with the skull of the mutter. He waved his sword in the direction of the enemy, but he deformed his body in time. The monster was going to escape, but the guy could not allow him and chased after him. The demon was quite fast, so Zhang Kui sought to kill him as soon as possible to get skills, and first of all, study the technique of jumping from the rock for quick movement. When the monster turned the horn, the hero had one interesting idea how to catch him. Near one of the yards, the young lady whispered a fun tune, taking water treatments. A wonderful stranger appeared unexpectedly over her, around which the walls of the wall flew. She did not have time to understand what was happening, but she managed to see how the guy crashed the stone into the wreckage and threw past. From the fear that she could get into it, the maiden sheed with her hands, barely looking at the stranger. Zhang Kui threw one look at the girl, saying that she had a good body. After that, the man chased after the monster, as if nothing had happened, and the sleepy girl shouted after. Meanwhile, the hosting table was covered in the living room of the emperor, and many guests gathered. Yu announced that today in his house is double joy. It concerned the villas of the Golden Eagle and the fact that his son was escaped from the evil curtain. But the emperor did not have time to register how a stroke was shot over his head, which resulted in the fragments of the room, and Zhang Kui jumped out of the hole. Then she ran around the table, sweeping all the dishes and breaking the dishes. Local men were outraged from such arrogance. However, the monk was indifferent to dissatisfaction with his arrival. He was about to bring to the end. The guest took with him the same seals that he recently been able to save the son of the emperor. He threw one of them from the monster, going to finally overcome it. The body of the monster was pierced with unpleasant sensations. It could not move from the place because of the imposed spell. Zhang Kui went forward to look at the demon's face, while driving away those who stood in his way. The men's attendees began to expose their blades. They did not understand where this savage came from here. One of them regretted that he had just injured his father's cousin's father in law's father, in law's father, in law. The emperor appealed to the courtiers to stop and reported that he was a Zhang Kui monk, whom he invited as an exorcist. But the audience did not seem like a man looked like him. He went to the executioner, and they began to think that the master had been deceived. Emperor Yu approached the monk, bowed and asked in a lost voice what was the matter. Zhang Kui replied that the spirit that the son was obsessed was a malicious unclean. This did not mean that the guy did something immoral, because in society there were many animals in the human face with cute smiles. The emperor assured that he may not be the best person, but his Wangchang is a wonderful, sincere and loving book. Reading was his main merit. Zhang Kui listened with approval how a young gentleman from childhood spent his pocket money to help orphans and widows. And when he grew up, the poor began to give him money. Everyone was wondering how it turned out, so the monk decided to ask the demon in person. With a sharp wave of his hand, he dropped the cloak that worn all this time. However, the audience was not the most pleasant sight. The body of the demon consisted of a skeleton covered with a mud. Zhang Kui did not understand what it was, a scarecrow in front of them, a clay monster or a sorting ghost. The monster tried to say something, but people heard only some incomprehensible outbuilding, which testified to the language barrier. So there was nothing to wait. Zhang Kui grabbed his sword and cut off his head with one wave. From this monster, the guy gained a lot of experience, which could mean that he was still stronger behind him. The palm of the man was well dirty, so he decided to wipe them first to get into his arms. The monk thought that if someone is more important behind this monster, then the experience would be attracted to him no less. It turned out that he wiped his hands on a kimono silver blade before leaving. The man said that Mr. Yu would pay for his clothes. However, the handsome man stopped him because he wanted to say that this monster was not one who saw one more days ago. These words forced the monk to stop. He reacted, asking where the gentleman had to see him. The man bowed and, as a sign of courtesy, called his name, Chun Wushuang, from the estate of the Celestial Eagle. Unfortunately, the young man personally saw that evil interim's autumn wind, where his villa was the Heavenly Eagle conducted a grandiose event of Manhwa. Hearing the address, the monk said that there was nothing to collect here and ordered him to show him the way. Chen asked the man to be a little more patient. He was in mind that he hoped to be protected by Zhang Kui on this event if there was some demon or unclean. In the city of the demon, there is a technique for making pill. Later, the guy wants to throw a few points into her. Their manufacture could be considered a spreading of money. The old good habit of saving will not hurt. He addressed the villa owner with the question of how much he was ready to pay. Chen replied that at the end of the event, I would like to offer the sculpture Wind Breathing. Zhang Kui heard for the first time and asked how much money you can raise it. The attendees knew that the sculpture of Wind Breathing was worth several thousand gold because her spirit could tear tigers and leopards alive. This meant that it costs several cities. In the estate of the Heavenly Eagle did not disclose this treasure, and the gentleman so just wants to hand him as a gift. Hearing such nice news, the monk rejected his sword, approached the master and said he agreed to take up the case. Chen Wushuang was also glad their cooperation, but after they shook their hands, a dirty trace remained on his palm. And a few hours later, the man arrived in the estate of the Heavenly Eagle. The sky was illuminated by Chinese lanterns. There was even an area of comfort with the courtesans, which were mostly elite nobles. This is how the evenings of the rich were spent. Such was the essence of human beings from time immemorial. Zhang Kui, surrounded by 3 different beauties, acknowledged that the opportunities received from Mr. Yin Jian are really good. The guy turned to one of his courtesans to find out if he knew about what happened in Manhwa. Stroking his chest with his finger, the woman replied that Tanin's house had spent a bunch of money to get the best of the capital's flowers. Having put her hand, she added that when the time came and start singing, the inherent will give the pill of diligence. Zhang Kui wanted to know what it was a flower, so the girl decided to show him. The beautiful young lady drove her fingers on the traditional tool that made an incredible sound. This flower really had an incredible appearance, but Zhang Kui was a man who spent the night from Kitsin, so you would not surprise him. But the fact that, looking at, noticed the courtesan, she shocked her. The girl asked the monk whether she wanted to use additional services today. The boy was not very pleased with the fact that the inhabitants of this world are so shamefully treating his body. Drinking water on the roof, he remembered that he had passed all the month since he came here and almost understood the local rules. Zhang believed that if you go back, life would be difficult. But since the man was a retired Chinese soldier while following justice, nothing will change. The hero recalled the moment of his death and acknowledged that his act was quite bold, and it turns out that he was posthumously proclaimed by a martyr. From the reflection of the monk distracted a very familiar feeling that there is a demon nearby. One of the courtesan was chasing a monster, and the girl was crying for help. The monster ordered her not to shout, threatening that if she did it again, he would collect herself in the bones. He covered her mouth with his paw and said that people were very attractive when frightened. The victim tried to get out, but the monster was approaching closer. At this time, the moonlight illuminated the figure that was going to save it. Zhang Kui quickly rushed to the scene, the noise of falling behind. The monster was angry and looked around to see who dared to interfere with him with a thief. Zhang Kui approached him difficult steps, saying that the demon is really fearless if he decided to attack people in a big city. He threatened the monster so that he would not even wait for mercy, because of him, he remembered somewhat bad from the past. In response to such statements, the monster began to laugh, because he was convinced that he would not be able to hurt him than a mosquito bite. He proclaimed that the present world did not belong to people, because none of them dared to encroach on 3 sacred mountains, 4 caves, and 5 underwater kingdoms. The monster reported that a few months ago, the detachment destroyed one of the human cities, but no one said anything about it. He was absolutely sure that no one would dare to resist the detachment of General Mu. The mention of this name in Zhang Kui caused only frantic hatred and desire for revenge. The demon said that people in the modern world are nothing more than ordinary toys and prey. He opened his mouth and was going to pour out on a man who wanted to interfere with him. The monster was not lucky because of ignorance of the one who was now in front of him. He did not have time to do anything like the rival's blade was already in his belly. Zhang, of course, replied that sooner or later he would get to the general, but he was about to kill this monster here and now. Before his death, the demon tried to call for help, but his request became empty after the partition of his body in half. Zhang Kui was not so far from the 3 sacred mountains, 4 caves, and 5 underwater kingdoms. It could be a fate and a sign of what to go. He cut the ropes that tied the girl's body and assured the poor man that all was well. She hugged him and thanked him sincerely for the salvation, because if it weren't for the guy, it would be dead now. Zhang replied that it is not necessary to remain a courtesan and should be careful. However, the poor had no other way out. She had younger brothers who had to be fed because her parents died at the hands of the monsters. In addition, many girls are forced to suffer so much. The man was angry that demons destroy people's life here. He was sure that the day would come when he leaves his mark in the history of destruction of demons. 3 days later, a large number of people gathered on the main square of the estate to witness an unusual event. Today, Manhwa was held a grand event. For the first time, they had an incredible flower, which was a great honor. Everyone thanked Mr. Chen Wushuang, because if it were not for him, the residents would not have been able to enjoy such beauty. This event was protected by Zhang Kui. The demon of dirt disappeared, and for several days, other creatures have not made themselves known. It was not a very good sign. The flower, playing on which sang, "Longevity, forcing, century, it all depends on heaven, the desire to get immortality." Everyone present admired her wonderful singing, proclaiming the girl the main property of the capital. A woman of a fascinating kind, whose sweeping the melodic lines and the kind of this child descended on the top of the flag. Seeing her, the locals thought that the fidgeted man went down to them from behind the clouds and began to bow. In her hands, the woman kept a box that she was about to hand over to the young lady. Seeing this item in front of her, the girl thought it was a pill of diligence. Chen Wushuang descended to her, and they both thanked the divinettes for the gift. Everything went well thanks to the Zhang Kui monk. The nobleman thought he had to thank. However, Chen did not have time to do this because the guy followed the woman who gave the gift. The beauty asked the monk what it was necessary and why he began to chase her. Earlier, Zhang wanted to meet her, but when he saw this woman, I realized that she was not a man. Externally, the woman was incredibly attractive, like a lotus flower. Not surprisingly, everyone accepted her as a dinner. The beauty did not deny that she may be a man and maybe a demon, and asked if he was going to kill her. Zhang Kui had no such intention. He was looking for another demon and would like to know about him. The woman proudly replied that it is acting alone and does not want to do with anyone. He began to ask if she was familiar with the dirt demon, because Lotto should be known about it. But with an indiscriminate expression, the woman replied that she had never met. The monk realized that if the lotus flower is not familiar with the demon of dirt, then most likely it is not so influential. One of the court servants informed the terrible news that made everyone alert. The girl reported that the beauty of the capital, the main character of Lin Yanchen, is now obsessed with a demon. This meant that the monk had to go to the palace sooner. Leaving the roof, he told a white lotus that he would find it. Lin Yanchen, related, screamed to all courtiers that they do not deserve a slight death, and sooner or later, the mistress will end them. He was travelled to a monk with a saucer of water in which a piece of paper painted with a cinema. He kept her face and poured the fluid to his mouth to expel the demon from the body. This ritual helped, and the man could now destroy the evil monster, which showed his face. Zhang could not understand why the demon chose Yu and Lin Yanchen, because they had nothing to do with each other. Suddenly, a demonza appeared and said it was called immense consciousness. She turned to the monk and asked her to follow her. Chen asked where he was in a hurry. Zhang asked Mr. to be able to go for everything, saying that he should go. It turned out that the lotus flower knew something and wanted her husband to see it with her own eyes. After some time, they reached the bamboo forest. This was the place that the woman wanted to show. During the road, Zhang Kui was very tired and decided that the next time you would need to add endurance. Considering the neighborhood, the guy could not understand how such an elegant creature could be born in such a town. He remembered the words of the lotus flower of immense consciousness and asked what it means. The beauty replied that 700 years ago the teacher was cultivated here. She listened to the sacred scriptures and appeared with a shade of spiritual wisdom. Then the woman began to worship the master that he created immense consciousness. They arrived at a small swamp around the houses, and Lotus said it was the same place where it appeared. Remembering the dirt demon, the monk asked if the monster was also born here. Lotus was not sure, but knew that immense consciousness has her own body and thinking, easily versed in demons, and using other people can increase his intelligence and determination. Then it explained the guy why the monster chose Lin Yanchen and Yu Wencheng. They are ideal candidates because one sings well and the other reads a lot. Lotus' teacher has long been silent and she did not have brothers and sisters. The girl believed that this swamp turned into a demon after the sacred scripture was heard. The beauty knew that the teacher did not like to resort to cruelty, not to mention the use of gross power to her creations. This demon is too strong, so it wants to help the monk in its destruction. Zhang Kui confessed that he was a fake monk who has never been married in his 38 years. But Lotus did not pay attention to it and told her husband that there was no need for unnecessary words. She looked at the plant near the swamp and said that the aura was scattered and the demon had touched the ground. The girl broke her head, stretched the monk, and said that, using it, he would be able to find a monster. She explained that this thing is used to monitor the breathing of people and demons. Zhang Kui noted that this plaque was very convenient and asked to be shown in business. White Lotus rushed without warnings from the place of the smoke, which left the plant abandoned by it. The fake monk hurried after the girl, feeling that the aura had just scattered. He hoped that the end would not be the worst. Looking at, Lotus shouted her husband so that he would not fall behind and catch her sooner. Subsequently, they passed a strange place, similar to a cemetery where wooden beams stood instead of tombstones. Lotus reported that after the demon's strength begins to develop, he captures the body and soul, and all this is the graves of his victims. Subsequently, they reached the right place where the mud was already waiting for them. They have both skin ants after the feeling of another monster. However, the voice that addressed them was quite familiar to the girl, and she immediately recognized him. It was her teacher, who was now like a disgusting demon. He recognized the Lotus and said they had not seen themselves for a long time. The girl looked at the terrible figure of the old and regretfully asked what happened to him. The teacher replied that he had been promoting Buddhism for 200 years and there was no hope for longevity. Over time, although he believed that he understood the whole essence of life and death, as a result, in such a long time, his heart and mind captured disappointment. The old man could not believe that everything would end. The teacher did not want to die. He has always been immersed in Buddhism, but he never liked such a life. At that moment, the old man realized that he wanted to live on, and the darkness fully captured his body, giving such an opportunity. That is why, when the teacher was dying, he left a trace of his spiritual wisdom in the swamp with Lotus, and then a demon of dirt arose. The level was low, the path is difficult, so I had to apply immense consciousness. Zhang Kui guessed that everything, as expected, went in the worst direction. The followers disappeared. The aura was scattering. Except for the teacher, there was no one else. The fake monk was not sure whether he would be able to deal with the opponent with the demon Lotus Demon. The man understood that it would not be easy, but decided to just act. He is the main character, so he cannot lose. Lotus asked in a quiet, calm voice whether the teacher still remembered why he taught her. In those years, it was difficult to handle it, but that man was able to teach her something. Once upon a time, the old man said that all creatures are equal, but only pure and compassionate can be free. But the White Lotus did not understand, if it really so, then what the teacher wanted to achieve. And if he considered it the truth, then what was cultivated all these years? The girl did not understand. She took 2 blades and strongly told the master that his student would definitely solve everything. In response to such boldness, the monster decided that he would be overwhelmed because they still had once been destined to die. Lotus was a little surprised due to a new teacher's accounting, and her teammate was already ready for battle. The guy was a little lazy to fight, so he wanted this monster to die. The mud monster swung his hand, but the opponent managed to evade a blow. Zhang Kui most wanted to deal with this monster sooner, so he was intentioned to kill the sword. After the attack, the body of the opponent flew through the outskirts into small particles. From these balls of dirt formed new mud monsters who wanted to kill a false monk. Metal swords intended for battle with people began to materialize in the hands of the Uglof. The teacher shouted that he just wanted to survive, and Lotus and Jang Kui should help him in this. The fighters were not in the best position because they were surrounded by a huge number of enemies. Lotus shouted to the teacher in response that deer people could not do so. She swung with blades and began to shake every mud monster that happened on the way. Jang Kui considered this world crazy because the demon kills a demon created by man. These thoughts raised his fighting passion, so the guy also hurried to deal with the scoundrels. How many monsters would not be killed? They did not become less. They all generated and attacked again. An obsessed teacher shouted that the opponents had no chance of winning because his clones could not be killed. He sent even more disgusting monsters armed with blades. Jang Kui was angry because he didn't calm down. He was sure that the third hero could not have a happy end. However, with such thoughts, he didn't notice how he was injured from the back in his back. Feeling severe pain, the hero swung his sword and overcome the enemies that expected him from the other side. Jang Kui realized that a simple waving sword was just a waste of power. He monitored how elegantly the Battle of Lotus and how well she showed herself. However, the hero understood that such a pace did not last long, and it is necessary to change tactics. It was quite logical that first it was necessary to deal with the boss so that the puppets ceased to attack. However, his mud monster was not an end, and because of this, it was not possible to approach closer. The hero overwhelmed every monster, but it made no sense without the opportunity to get closer. The demon told the young man that he would also become a clone in the end, so let him not even resist. Lotus helped the partner to get rid of the obstacles that were surrounded by placing the mud demons. She came closer and reported that in order to overcome immense consciousness, you need to use it. Lotus was part of its embodiment, so she asked the monk to protect her for a while. Jang Kui replied that this is not a problem if only for long, and then he also had a trump card in the sleeve. The girl saw 2 scars on his back and realized why he would not be able to keep the defense for a very long time. There was very little time, so she folded her fingers, focused, and started her ritual. The old demon saw it and was very frightened. He ordered his puppets not to let the girl use techniques. Jang Kui came up with how to effectively keep the defense. The monk used his ability to spell and scattered the seal everywhere. This made it possible to destroy all the approaching demons and even touches a little old. After the explosion on the site of the enemies, only a large bunch of swamps and burned papers remained. The exhausted Jang Kui acknowledged that they were just a pathetic demon and was convinced that he was almost nailed. He tried to turn into the lotus, but his body pierced the electric current. It was a consequence of such a massive attack. Their main rival has not died yet and still sought victory, from him a terrible aura of hatred. The old demon still had forces, so he again sent his army of mud monsters to battle. 2 puppets almost approached the defenseless couple. Their situation was worse. Jang Kui asked the girl to hurry because he could no longer restrain opponents. White Lotus finally completed preparation for equipment and could use it against enemies. The red beads pulled into the pipes and began to burst the monsters, getting to the teacher. Jang Kui was on the hair of death from the hands of the demon, but fortunately the partner stopped them in time. However, the fact that on the faces of the monsters saw a guy in front of him, he was scared. All the bodies of the marsh monsters belonged to the victims that the old demon used for their own purposes. The teacher turned to the lotus with dissatisfaction because the girl dared to use his weapon against him. Manhwa, still focused on the use of technology, tried not to pay attention to his words. The monster began to press on Pity. Asking, and further being her mentor, he began to complain that he did not want to die. The old man believed that the girl had nothing to worry about because she herself is a demon and could live forever. Green fluid began to appear on the lotus body, which was an alternative to human blood. The fake monk understood that things are bad. Now the situation depends only on his actions. The man took the sword in his hands, going to end the confrontation and kill the mud monster. He swung and promised a good man who lived more than 200 years that he would expect good funerals. And despite the old man's request for a mercy, Jang Kui cut it off, causing the last blow. Finally, the demon left a devastating explosion that rejected the guy a few meters ago. Jang Kui did not think that the old man, when he was death, would lift such a noise. It did not encourage. He stood out of place and looked at the lotus side, asking the girl whether she was fine with her. No less than a man, the girl offered him a little stroll. The fake monk cast a calming look at her and answered the proposal. Walking under the sunset, Lotus told that the teacher was in fact just a monk with a good heart. One day, he saved a dying squirrel and read her sacred scriptures. The animal also liked the girl, and as a child, she laid several grains of melon, and in the morning, they were gone. The Demodza asked the interlocutor if he was interested in listening to it, but Zhang Kui didn't deny. He learned that the teacher managed to win through true doctrine. The man wanted to watch everything and see what would happen next. Lotus noticed that perhaps this technique is exactly what in the future it is worth preaching the fighter of demons. They reached the city where the residents fussed. Sellers still offered delicious buns and dumplings. People took them in a break between work. White Lotus remembered how the teacher told her that demons should become people to start preaching, which is why she learned to live as a person for 100 years. During this time, Demodza realized that the lives of simple mortals are too short, and the pleasure they cling to is pathetic. However, they are not given this. Zhang Kui did not deny the fact that the mortals would weaken every day, but also reminded that the lotus flower is a non-resident, a higher creature. If only a Demodza could become a person, she would have found out if there was a life after death, but she was never allowed to understand it. When the girl's body began to dispel, Zhang Kui grabbed her hand and said that in this case he would become a thief and stole her to show all the charms of human life. Before the disappearance, the demos smiled and told the monk that she was a rather funny joke. The next moment, at the sight of the figure of the White Lotus, only green sparks of light remained. The fake monk did not joke at all when he was about to snap the inherent. The man used the system of the art of call and managed to seal the spirit of the White Lotus with the help of his strength. Holding green lotus in his hands, Zhang Kui promised that he would definitely make a man's inhabitant. The course of events is transferred 2 days in advance to the Yu Palace. The emperor and his whole family thanked Zhang for what he did for them. In gratitude, they wanted to give him a treasure trove full of gold preciousness. Seeing such treasures, the eyes of Liu Mao and Li Dun have shined with surprise and pleasure. The girl planned to spend her part on the clothes of the heir of a silver blade, and the mentor was not going to stay behind the younger generation. However, Zhang Kui grabbed both of them by the shells, stopping on the way to a generous reward. The fake monk was shyly advised the emperor to keep him better for the dowry. The words heard were surprised not only by the ruler, but also by all those present who gathered to pass the guests. He pointed to the granddaughter of the emperor and reported that her pregnancy was a month, so he asked to take care of a born baby and grow him a future woman. The fake monk gently said that he would return to this yard in 18 years. He grabbed the partners and said that it was time to leave the estate while they were missing the lost money. The operator asked the girl in surprise whether the truth just announced, and she was really pregnant. The granddaughter answered shyly that she was like a month, but she was very busy, so she didn't have time to tell. Looking after a false monk, the emperor thought that the guy was also a seer. The next moment, the man was right behind his back because he forgot to say something before leaving. He asked to remember that a newborn baby will definitely need to be called Liang. This name meant lotus. The emperor didn't deny that the man consulted with Yu family and believed that Yu Liang sounds good. But he was worried about another question. What to do if not a girl but a boy? The goods that went further on horseback, their road ran through the forest. Dun asked the teacher if he did not want to drink water. The old man replied that he was drinking her too often after he was caught. He even rounded his stomach, and it was very difficult. The monk had his own method of movement. He jumped on the branches and ahead of the two. The man asked why they were so slow because they went 10 miles forward. Dun can compare their moving methods with Real Way and make fun of it. However, the girl acknowledged that Zhang Kui was worthy to be called a monk and realized that they were already far behind him by level. The next moment, the man landed in front of the horses, holding a purse in his hands. He gave the dun to the fruit and said they needed to wash them thoroughly and then give the old one. Liu Mao replied that he had no appetite. The teacher did not think that he would get sick if he was a little in the rain. He looked weakened and thought that in the end, old age gradually took his. The monk replied that he was a beacon and said to just wait until they got to the Prajjo. There, the man promised to find the best doctor so that the old man could eat normally again. The cheerful mood of the hero spoiled the unexpected smell of blood that came completely. He asked the comrades to depart, assuring that he would deal with what happened. The monk chased forward, feeling the smell of blood is getting stronger and stronger. At the top of one of the rocks, he saw a cart that defended himself against wolf creatures. It was a flock of evil demons led by a black warning who eaten a human leg. Zhang Kui did not fully see the monster. Its level of cultivation is not so great, so there could be problems. The leader of the pack had a good sense, and he noticed the monk, so he needed to come up with a plan. The monk saw a flock of monsters approaching a man who lacked his leg. The leader approached him closer and mercilessly shook his body, tearing his limbs. Demons continued to eat an unhappy man, being near the trolley. The people who were inside were very worried because the monsters were so strong. Zhang Kui could not look at it yet, so he jumped into the air and rushed to the leader. He rushed to his body, clenched his head with his hand, and stuck his blade directly into his heart. After the victory over the leader, he stood up and threw away his gaze on other members of the pack, asking who still dreamed of continuing his crimes. The frightened demons began to run in different directions, afraid to die from his hand. Zhang Kui shouted in response to the cannibals that tonight he would read them well. He approached the left demon, acknowledging that monsters are bolder when they devour people than now. Rescued passengers of the carriage approached the monk, bowed, and thanked him for the salvation. The man replied that he liked to kill demons. He looked at the leader of the pack and said that the victims got a demonic poison. So when passengers arrive in the city, you need to find someone who removes it. Looking at his wounded comrades, the main detachment sincerely thanked the monk for announced. After completing the case, Zhang Kui turned around and was going to leave the fight. But it seems that these people did not want to let him go so quickly. The man asked him not to rush. He did not know where he was heading, but suggested that they may have a chance to meet. Zhang Kui replied that he was heading to Xingzhou, and as if the coincidence, it turned out that travelers were also going to this city. The monk did not like him, as a man grabbed him. He said just to keep his side and not to do such movements, it was not to his liking. On the way, Zhang Kui learned that he had met with a derived minister who returned to save his family, because Zaihichzhou also did not miss the evil. Demons even attack on the road. When the travelers approached the same mountain, in the midst of which the statue of man with a sword in his hands was visible, the monk wondered what it was. The minister explained that this statue of General Shidachen is considered a local attraction, a relic that has remained since ancient times. Following it on the border of Zaihichzhou on the road, many tourists meet. In 2 days of the road, they will be able to reach the city of Haishui. As far as the monk knew now, it was impossible to create statues of similar sizes, which meant that in ancient times there was really incredible civilization. When travelers came to the city, the minister promised the man that the next time they would surely treat him with a drink. Li Dun lowered the teacher from the horse and carefully led him to the entrance to the town, hoping to find a doctor. Travelers from the trees were followed by a guard who searched for one famous thief. The governor ordered the subordinate to go to the city of Haishi to argue and to catch a demon. When travelers entered the gate of the city, the minister called the worker standing on the watch. They immediately approached the little man. All were very surprised by his type of physique. He smiled in the gentleman what services they wanted to take advantage of their city. The monk replied that they needed rooms for the night, asked to prepare quality food and drinks. He also added that there are patients among them, so he wished a warm soup with a paw. The man asked them to wait a little and turned to his colleague to take away the horses and prepare everything. The minister was very frightened by the guy with freckles, who immediately appeared behind their back. Zhang Kui asked the panel to take the teacher to the room to eat. The girl agreed. Minister, all these people seem very strange. He suggested that it was a robbery. The monk said that there are so many people in this world who have to get on the path of the robber to somehow get caught about the family, which is why they are so angry. The man was upset because it is very difficult to survive now, despite the fact that in many cities the situation has stabilized, but in some areas there is still chaos. The owner served the guests with food, and now that they were busy, he decided to ask other workers. He was in a hurry and quickly ran to the kitchen, where all the dishes for visitors were prepared by the old lady. The man approached the door, thrown with firewood, unfolded them, and was going to open. And he announced the owner who arrived many high and large people, including the monk. He believed that everything was not so easy to do with them. The man, when he smoked the cradle, replied that they were just doing things that no one should interfere with. In any case, he ordered to wait, because tomorrow travelers should leave. The monk entered courage and offered his interlocutors to drink alcohol. Just men had already drank enough and could no longer make him a company. As the monk drunk, a group of threatening people in black suits suddenly broke into the institution. These people began to call the workers of the institution. The minister recognized them. These are the warders of the price. When the men paid their attention to the table, they were incredibly surprised to see the monk. They thought it was the same person they wanted and sent swords and crossbows to him. The warden of Jiangqi informed that he was wanted and suggested to give up without any resistance. The governor came to the building and turned to the guy, calling him a dark monk. He approached the man and advised to surrender, looking at the portrait of the wanted person. However, the appearance turned out that on paper, and here it is, completely different people, which was extremely eliminated by the governor. He gave a strong slap leader for the fact that he could not even recognize the thief. The angry man ordered the owner of the institution to prepare 10 rooms for overnight stay. The man said that they could not do it because they had only 5 left. The angry commander pointed to the table where the tourists were sitting and ordered them to be expelled to liberate the rooms. Zhang Kui was increasingly disappointed in these warders because of such cheeky behavior. The minister got up from the table and turned to these people, calling the eunuch in such majestic. The governor recognized Mr. Tensora of Zagzhou Yusiyuan. He had heard that the minister had transferred to the city and asked that he had forgotten in such an worried town. The man replied that he decided to come secretly, but didn't expect to attack demons, and fortunately, the monk Zhang Kui saved them. The minister was angry that the monster is raging throughout the district and the eunuch does nothing with it. The governor proudly replied that it did not concern them and ordered his subordinates to go. The minister apologized to the monk because he did not want to lift Shumik because of his status, so the guy replied that he was not there to this case. Even if he was a woman, he was indifferent. However, he was somewhat interested. Zhang Kui asked where the prices of the eunuch from. The minister replied that everything was related to the first emperor. Initially, the caretakers controlled the city of Gochusi, and others were not allowed to interfere. However, at one point, several trusted people came into conspiracy against the ruler of the empire. The monk replied that he understood everything. It is necessary to make sure that the opponents did not activate the nuclear bomb, and the eunuchs control everything. Usiwan was just confused after such an answer. He asked the man what he was talking about. Monk reported that a nuclear bomb is the most powerful person in his hometown. The minister was surprised to hear about the most powerful person and decided that, as possible, he would go to this city and get acquainted with him. There was already a night outside, so the traveler had to go to rest to gain strength for tomorrow. But as soon as Zhang Kui lay down in the bed, he felt that someone had already come to visit him. The monk quickly grabbed his blade, opened the door with a roar, and asked who dreamed of worrying him. In the corridor, he saw the same eunuch he met this day. The monk asked the man that he had forgotten here. The governor did not understand what he was and suspected that he conceived something. Blocky also worried why the minister was respectful of this guy with such respect. The monk realized that without a fight he did not do, the opponent told not to dissolve his hands and not to point here. The demon realized that these two were too sensitive and immediately recognized it. The controversy of 2 young men distracts black fog, which spread throughout the territory. Looking at the mountain, they saw an incredibly scary demon. From the balcony, it was visible how a terrible creature of a strange shape went down to the floor below them. The governor guessed that the enemy did it to block them out for escape. The minister ran out of the room and, seeing the monster, said that he did not think that this evil would come to the Pichichzhou. The blondish aggressively replied that his family lived in the capital for a long time. They did a hard work on the destruction of demons, and the city responded to Liu Jiyn. But he understood that if the demon reached here, other guards could be dead. Men from the detachment on the audience were woke up from noise and prepared for battle. The eunuch jumped from the balcony to the ground, ordering his subjects to lining him. After the formation of the system, the commander ordered the detachment that it was time to order this demon. Surprised by such determination, Zhang Kui suggested that this guy could be stronger than him. The noise from the outside also heard Li Dun. She looked from the door, asking the master what was going on, and he told her not to leave the room. The girl quickly reacted to his words and hid behind the door, thinking about why the demon arrived here. The monk cast his gaze on the governor, also suggested that he hide if he could not help. The man also responded quickly to his words and in the next second closed in the room. Zhang Kui first saw the work on the audience, so he went closer to watch them. The governor ordered the subjects to pull the crossbows and aim at the monster in front of them. Applying his ability to detect intangible creatures, the monk saw a demon in a white dress with black long hair, above which the lamp hung. This creature could not be seen by ordinary people. The man at first could not understand how they were aiming. Then he stopped that it was thanks to special sights, and without them, they are no longer so strong. The governor turned to the subjects and ordered them to open fire on the enemy. Their shots were accompanied by heavy explosions. The monk acknowledged that this attack was very good, and for some reason these words were eliminated by the eunuch, and he ordered to shoot again. One of the warriors noticed that the black fog was retreating and informed the commander. It seemed strange to the monk. The eunuch suggested that the wandering souls and ghosts drove this fog further and further. However, Zhang Kui told him not to rejoice early, because this monster and a thing over him stopped again. The monk could not understand what the matter was. The fog was getting thicker, and even now it was difficult for him to see something. The eunuch obeyed his advice and ordered the subordinates to prepare for another shot. In the conversation intervened a man who said that the catastrophe was approaching because this woman is a demon from the class of a ghostly lady, and every time she appears, someone says goodbye to life. He stressed that if they start victims, the spirit will cause ghosts, and then no one escapes. The eunuch grabbed the man by the peel and began to ask where the simple mortal information came from. He suggested that a man could have been conspiracy to be detrimental to people, but he denied the accusation. Another creature joined their conversation, who asked the master not to disturb the sixth child. The beast came closer and reported that he told him that information. They recognized themselves. It was a family demon. The eunuch reminded that Chao Yan forbade sacrifice and asked that he had forgotten here. Zhang Kui was aware that a family demon has some memories that are very similar to the situation in the northeast of China, but the previous dynasty lost its power because of worship. This creature was incredibly strong. The beast reported that all these people he have sheltered have a disability. Then he began the language for the man and said that he was very careful to his guest house and never harm others. The owner swore that this gentleman did not lie and otherwise let him hit him with a thunder. One of his subordinates told the commander to kill this man. The monk spoke to the beast, noted that without it, people would not survive, and it was worth renamed the guest house to the demon. Then he looked around the governor in and said that if they were going to kill these people, they must first be overcome. The dark fog did not even think to dispel, so the man realized that the sacrifice wanted to bring a few souls. But he did not agree with anything. The atmosphere in the air became more difficult when the monk and eunuch sent their views on each other. The blonde proudly put his hands in the letters, and the first turned his head from the other direction. He lowered the man to the ground and told his subjects to stop, because their enemy is a dark fog from the outside. The monk approached the official and hugged him by his shoulder, praising what he was. The blonde didn't like such a gesture, so he evaded his arms, then turned to the demon and asked that it was a class of a ghostly lady. The beastly said that during the former dynasty in the world, the famous Kudaban was an incredibly gifted group of people who were flooded with applause. But unfortunately, after the dark times came, no one escaped from the theatre group. Since then, for an unknown reason, a demon ghost has emerged that hunts all living things. From the monk's story, he concluded that those people were killed, and this creature is one of the dead who want to take revenge for it. All present were incredibly surprised hearing the philosophical reflections of this man. The caretakers did not think that everything was so simple. They believed that demons were only needed to harm the parties to the parties. The monk knew nothing to the account of others, but he had to understand, because even 10 years after 10 years, it is not too late. The governor learned that the demon raged here for 100 years and asked why local warders were not taking any action. The animal replied that by this point the location of the class of the ghost lady was unknown. It was impossible to pursue, and the guard could not do anything. He was not even sure that in this situation they would be able to cope. Zhang Kui seemed strange, because starting with a demon-devouring person and ending with this, something went wrong here from the very beginning. The monk realized that the evil and spirits in the Prajjo are much stronger than in other cities. The ghost lady returned again, and the beast was not sure if they could survive this night. The eunuch wanted to order his subjects to shoot, but saw that they had fallen under the influence of a demon. The man understood that it was necessary to fight because only then he would succeed. He took a small bell in his hands and began to shake it. The sound was unpleasant so much that Obsessed returned to consciousness, and all the others pulled their ears in the hope of hearing it. The ghost lady also responded to the bell, but he did not harm her. The official tried to continue the execution of the equipment, but his attribute began to cling to the particles. After that, his body seemed to hit the current. The blood flowed from his nose, and the fragments flew to the sides. In his exhausted position, the governor realized that things were very bad. Seeing that the demon intends to harm the man, the monk grabbed his sword because he did not intend to allow people to injure. The beast asked him to stop and wait a little, and then rushed forward. He approached the class of the ghostly lady and started negotiating with them to compromise. After the conversation, the demon announced that the spirits promised to release people, but they have one condition. Looking at the men, he said that the spirits needed a man who will become the bride of the ghost girl and replenish her blood. The ghost began to drive a finger to point out who she wants to see in her husband. Most of them began to run, hiding themselves with the fact that they had serious health problems and not much blood. But still, one wishing to have such a role. One lady ignored him, and when he reached the monk, pointed her finger on him. The choice was quite great, but the woman stopped on it, saying that he wanted him. Zhang Kui suspected that everything would be right, but he didn't think he would be able to get with him. Thinking that the monk was going to flee, the governor rejected his hand and asked him to stay. In response to this gesture, Zhang Kui proudly said that he was not going to go anywhere. Then he turned to the ghost and, pointing his finger on himself, told the woman that if he wanted him, then let him come and take. When the demon approached his body, Zhang Kui grabbed her hands and did not let him go on. The hero stopped her in front of him and looked at his face. The woman blushed and removed her gaze. The monk did not like the appearance of this demon at all. He hit her in the face, shouting that he looks awful. Almost everyone was very shocked, seeing the ghost of the ghost. The mind of the monk was blurred by the previous demons, so this was very disappointed. You will now need to answer and defeat the demons that stood above it. The monk grabbed his sword, and at that moment, the red-black haze dragged him to her. Seeing that the dark fog stopped, the warders thought that he would now digest the monk. The eunuch ordered men to shut up and get out of the back door to ask for help. They obeyed the command of the commander, but when they reached the exit, they found that he was sealed. The elderly elder said with sadness that if it were an opportunity to escape, he would have done it for a long time. There was little left before the dawn, and he hoped that the demons would receive the blood of the monk and calm down. Zhang Kui himself now found himself inside a black fog, which was even thicker than outside. Although he was delayed, the monk believed that everything was fine, because ideas now had to appear all the rivals. Noticing a large amount of zombies, the man realized that they were going to attack him now. The fact that there was a lot of them meant that the dark fog only lures people in a trap but did not kill. Zhang Kui came up with a plan for how to get out and told her opponents that they could have fun until he broke his head. Suddenly, the man saw a house from which strange sounds similar to playing the play came. The monk didn't deny that the demons of the masters of his business and said that, in this case, he was killed. After such words among the black fog, a large number of ghosts rushed to the enemy. Zhang Kui began to withstand the demons that appeared, carrying their heads from their shoulders. Then the man felt in the air poisonous gas, assuming that the demons were hunting again. He acknowledged that the tactics of rivals are quite good, and those are really very bold. However, the monk was not going to give one of them to go, because he intended to interrupt the demons to the last. Cutting the ghosts one by one, the man shouted that they did not die for the crimes they committed, even hundreds of times. Today, Zhang Kui intended to take revenge on the souls that demons have exterminated during these years. He promised that none of them would go alive. The hero knew that all creatures had his own gate, and intended to see what these ghosts were. Using the technique, the man saw a small temple and promised that the demons would harm people, destroy all their graves. On all sides, ghosts began to climb on all sides. If they wanted to die so much, then the fighter intended to help them. The ghostly ladies began to shout that life was too short to live memories. After these words, the man suddenly fell and he released from his blade. The ghost took advantage of this opportunity and, leaving the neck, approached the pashaya to the monk. However, it was part of his plan. He suddenly pulled out his hand and grabbed the demon's head. With a daring expression, he asked permission from the ghost to look at her face closer. Zhang Kui was going to put this edge and, squeezing his fist, swung in the head of the monster. He believed that the fate of the demon was decided when they lost all good thoughts. After the victory, the monk received 5 points of experience and 1 new skill. The man was disappointed that it was all that has accumulated in 100 years. However, the fog was not going to dissipate, which meant that not all the enemies were over. Zhang Kui was not yet able to find the true body, but if everything was so simple, it would not be interesting. The man began to think about how it happened so that the ghosts destroyed, but still got into the trap. Then he remembered one moment from the previous battle when the eunuch took the bell. It has encouraged him to guess. Zhang Kui looked around and suggested that a dark fog could just be a weapon. The monk began to check the contents of the fog with his intentions to get a hint, which would lead him to unraveling. And after a few tens of seconds, he managed to come across the necessary thing. He found a broken probe that was a source of dark fog. Touching the handle, the man had a very strange feeling. The hero guessed that this thing was an ancient artifact that made sacrifices. He thought that if he could change the inscriptions in the fog, he would be able to redeem the sins of demons. After performing the technique, the fog disappeared, and the monk thought that everything finally ended. But not everything was so simple. The probe rose up and began to release a blue glow, which pierced the body of a man and, as a result, took away all the magical power. Zhang Kui couldn't even think that he was shaking a bunch of demons while he traveled to the other world. Fortunately, the technique of conduct allowed the monk to restore Manu, because otherwise the end would not be the best. In addition, it was difficult to manage the ancient artifacts, but it is good that our hero is a sterile. He immediately realized that his body could completely control the umbrella. It was only necessary for a man to open it as a dark fog began to spread everywhere in a radius of several kilometers. Zhang Kui liked the new ability very much. He was sure that it would agree in the future. After the man has overcome the demons, he was very hungry and decided that it was time to return to dinner. When Zhang Kui sat down at the table, he began to eagerly eat pork. Everyone was surprised by his appetite. The monk asked the neighbors on the meal why they did not eat, because it is impossible to waste food in vain. The eunuch, in an excited man, asked the man whether he was able to get rid of all the ghosts in the dark fog. But the hero, 800th, answered their questions that yes, he was able to do it. The minister could not believe it so far, because the ghosts were annoyed to people for 100 years, and no one could handle them. The monk pointed his finger on the artifact and reported that ghosts had given everyone so long because of this piece. But now she belonged to him, and the man decided that he would use it where he wanted. Each of the interlocutors had a different reaction to what they heard, but they decided not to mustomize the topic of this demon. The minister announced that he was in the near future to perform his duties in Xingzhou and remembered how the elder said that in this city there are now restless times. The beastly suddenly mentioned a place forbidden for people where no one has to walk. 3 sacred mountains, 4 caves, and 5 underwater kingdoms. Hearing about them, the men thought that the chaos in Xingzhou could be precisely because of this, and wanted to know more. He has already heard of these places before and asked the elder to tell them more about them. The family demon began his story from the fact that the location of 20 places is a great secret associated with the Dance Danes. The 3 sacred mountains are 3 mountain ranges bordering on this dynasty called Zhujian, Canlan, and Sanin. In the radius of 1,000 miles, there was no vegetation, but came closer, you could feel the presence of death. In this place, even the cultivators did not dare to approach what to say about ordinary mortals. Hearing this story, the monk suggested that 5 underwater kingdoms were just 5 large rivers and lakes. This assumption was faithful, but the demon stressed that the chaos in the Prajzhou has nothing in common, but most likely it is related to 4 caves. Each of them had its own unique name. A cave of multicolored clouds, a tribute, dead, General MU, gold light, a stone grave. 10,000 demons are a spiritual religion. Hearing the name of a familiar general, the monk was extremely angry and squeezed the table with his own hands. This meant that this is the monster that day, the most powerful thing that was. Now it was not surprising, because it's so dangerous that no one even thinks about overcoming it. The eunuch inn noticed how the monk took his hands in an attempt to reassure himself from the overwhelming feelings. He put his palm on his shoulder and said that the day would come when the race would take the top. Drinking, Zhang Kui replied that he liked the determined mood of the governor. The elder spoke again and reported that this disaster did not belong to the MU general, but rather the Cave of Golden Light. He meant a stone grave, Then the minister asked the beastless whether it was because of her in Zagojo. The elder replied that if it was so, the city would have stopped existing for a long time. One day he had to witness like this. More than 10 years ago, he was cultivated on the mountain. The skill level was not so high, but he had enough contact and a group of children he trained. But one day, there was a strange glow from nowhere. 2 rays struck, and the all around. Everyone, except the beast, died. And a few days later, the news appeared that there was a traitor born in the Prajjo, which has transformed into a person. The audience went that if you find it, you can find out the secret of the technique practiced in the Mahayana. The governor and the minister were incredibly shocked. Hearing this, one monk could not squeeze what it was about. And explained that cultivators differ from people like him. They are divided into a level, only 5: dedication, starvation, heavenly trial, wandering, and Mahayana. The simple mortal dedication continues life, but the demon develops spiritual wisdom and gives the opportunity to practice spell. Once in the stage of starvation, food and water will not be needed, talent and skills will begin to develop. It will be possible to overcome thousands of miles a day. Further, the cultivator is waiting for 3 disasters: thunder, fire, and wind. All this is a heavenly trial. Then the spiritual body begins to form, to travel through the sky and the earth to be aware of everything, and then Mahayana is formed. Zhang Kui wondered that it did not get further after these levels, but the governor became silent, not knowing what to say. The elder answered him, announcing that it was unknown to anyone. As far as he knew, no creature has been achieved. The monk was disappointed that all such weaknesses in this world. The governor asked what he separates so if he thought. The man replied that nothing, and translated the topic with his assumptions that Mahayana's practice in the cave of golden light caused chaos in Xingzhou. The elder confirmed that all the ghosts and demons have been going there, and for more than 10 years it has not been able to find a reborn person, and in the meantime, the locals are forced to worship demons to survive. The governor and the minister were incredibly evil because of what they heard. They did not understand what the warders were doing because the capital did not know about it at all. The beastly replied that the inhabitants stopped coping 20 years ago, so the prince closed all his eyes, and at the expense of the supervisors said that the gifts in the cave of the dead were not divided into people and demons. The officials made this answer even more because it meant that Xingzhou drove. The demon reported that the chaos in the city is moving to a new level, and even if there is a person capable of changing everything, there will be little sense. And he advised that if they wanted to survive, then in no case should they go to Xingzhou, and otherwise there will be nothing left of them. But Zhang Kui was surprised why they couldn't go there, just because of some kind of evil. The minister was worried that innocent people continue to die and no one would come to defense. The monk replied that in this case it is necessary to finish the meal and go to the city. The mentor tried to quench the man, emphasizing that the demon is right and is too dangerous in Xingzhou. They still need to go to other cities. Zhang Kui was indifferent to the danger. He was still going to go to that city because he was not staged by the demons there. The man promised that he would later bring something delicious to the old and will also share a recipe for good alcohol. Then the mentor will be able to open his own tavern and earn a peer. On the way to the Liu Mao room, he noted that large investments were needed, and his student promised that after a while everything would be. When the dinner ended and everyone went around the rooms, the subject asked the official what to do next. He did not have time to answer because there was a knock. The man approached the door and opened them. There he saw the minister Yu and asked why he came and why he had not gone to the capital. The man went to the room, bowed to the governor, and said he wanted to ask him for the service. Blonde, with a serious expression of the face, replied that it would be too difficult to fulfill any request. Yu wanted to make clarity. He needs a price. The man believed that if he retreats now, he may lose his pride, as well as rise before the court with conscience. The eunuch bowed his head to his fist and asked what the minister wanted to get from him. After his hands, the man asked the blonde to go to the capital, put the emperor about everything that was happening in the city, and organized the strongest outlook. The eunuch announced that this time he arrived in Zagajo to grab a demon, and if he returns without his head, he could lose his authority. They began to think about how to notify everything because they can die if they do not invent anything. At the same time, they thought a common decision. If you find one who helps, then they can get out. Officials appealed to Zhang Kui to help them kill a demon. The Dark Taoists sacrificed dozens of boys and girls to turn them into ghosts. The men tried to stop it alone, but it didn't make sense. The monk agreed to kill a demon with one condition. He pointed to Li Dun and Liu Maor, saying that in return, they should help fit these two. Officials agreed without problems, assuring that now the girl and the old man are their family. Dun was surprised by such a hasty decision and tried to stop the partner before leaving. Zhang Kui knew that he was quite attractive and asked the girl not to behave as an obsessive. He took his new artifact and was going to go on the road. The monk went at dawn, taking with him another creature whose cry was heard in all the surroundings. The beastly voted because the man took him with him. Because if he is so desperate, it does not mean that the demon burns the desire to go there. Zhang Kui did not see anything wrong with this because he took him with him as a conductor. However, the beast resisted. He did not want to go so that he did not fall into new troubles. The monk was surprised and asked if the demon did not want to take revenge for all his dead children. After all, if he really loves cleanliness and peace, then why did you need to open the tavern in the Zicho? This could mean that the older one has not resigned with it. These words were enough to change the opinion of the demon. He resolutely replied that he would go with the monk. Zhang Kui encouraged him with the words that everything was going according to the laws of nature, and no one will be able to avoid punishment for their actions. And only if they go against the current, they will be able to restore justice. It took a few hours, and the man informed the partner that had already arrived in the city, from which a mysterious atmosphere was fanned. As soon as the men entered the city, they came across funerals, which began so early, where the dead began to be confused with the living. Looking at the outskirts, they felt the stronger presence of the spirit, which was just the beginning. In the evening, it would only be worse. One of the guards who noticed men suspected and looked at his scroll. He looked at the image and then at the monk and thought that a dark dasp was in front of him. The elder asked where they went on. Zhang Kui replied that you could not rush and first need to eat. The demon recalled that there was a wonderful lamb soup in Haishui, and when he heard it, the partner said that in this case, they were going there. The monk snacked at a high speed, so the partner asked him to hurry. But even after 12, Zhang Kui plates did not want to stop and asked for additional portions. They were approached by a group of men who accepted the blue-haired Dawn. They heard that the monk had come and decided to meet him. But the travelers didn't pay attention to them first and continued to ask for the soup with the lamb at the cook. Seeing the tail behind one of the men, these people guessed that they were a demon and there could be no mistake. Zhang Kui finally paid attention to this group and asked who was their head. One of the group replied that he could not publicly disclose it, but assured that the monk was a real hero and his lord also reached the hearing, so he prepared a banquet in his honor. Suddenly, one of his colleagues approached him and announced that a man in front of them was not the one, but the other has already arrived. After learning this news, the stranger turned to Zhang Kui to find out who he was. The monk asked in response to whom he received him and how many people were deceived and recruited. But the man was convinced that only the Dark Taoists could come with a demon. However, he assumed that a man before them was him. The stranger bowed to the monk and asked if he would go to his master. The course of events is transmitted to the west from the city to the Temple of White Clouds, to which a small man was guarded. Bringing Zhang Kui and a family demon to the place, the stranger announced that they finally arrived. Looking at the man standing at the entrance, the monk realized that the spirit was felt clearer here. The elder also considered it, and they acknowledged that people are too cruel here. The demon reported that for some time he tried to fight it and then decided to escape. The monk decided to push him and asked what would happen if he was faster. But the old man did not like such jokes. He said that if a man plans to escape, he would not go with him. The stranger brought them into the yard and with an acidic expression informed the Yungsu monk that the guests arrived. 4 people were sitting in the courtyard. 2 men were one old man and a woman with a huge bag on her back. One of these persons was about to attach himself to the monk because he pretended to be. But the man was not going to stand just to stand and wait for death when the enemy approached. He grabbed his hands. Zhang Kui threw the attacker with all his power, ordered to go down and die. The monk replied that this opponent dared to pretend to be and stressed that he would show everything in detail. But he did not have time to finish the case because he was forced to block a small skull flying to him. From this attack, his blade began to crack on the wreckage and later broke out. After the skull turned back into the hands of the master, the monk asked how to understand this gesture. The oldest of 4 suggested that the man first tell them who he was. The monk replied that his name was Zhang Kui and explained that he was going to deal with the fraudster, that he had accepted his personality. But the attacker was not going to retreat and shouted that the Dark Towers was he, and this guy was a cheater. The monk drove his fist in his face and aggressively ordered to stop carrying this beacon. The man did not understand why these people gathered together and suggested that he needed to pretend to be a demon to merge with them. He emphasized again that this garbage pretended to be named after him, giving his name and appearance, but he could not copy. The oldest of the company again turned to the man and asked what he became famous. The monk replied that his work was to drive ghosts and control the demons. He did not do anything stupid. The man pathetic hair combed his hair and said that everyone who knows him was called the Lord of the Dark Mountain Heishan. A group of people was surprised to hear that name and acknowledged that it sounds convincingly. The beaten man asked the monk where he heard about this alias, wanted to say again that he was a Dark Lord. But Zhang Kui did not allow him to agree, cracking his palm again. The monk turned to his partner, the elder Huan, and asked him to show these people his essence. The demon understood that he had no choice and would have to cooperate to complete. He began the transformation, and at that moment, a huge beast appeared near the monk. The man was amazed that his partner even changed his appearance to look scary. This sight has caused men and women an ambiguous reaction, but they were silent. The monk bowed over the beaten and told the man that he would kill him if he was not called differently, emphasizing that it is bad to lie before the Dark Taus. However, the deceived was not going to succumb to his provocation, and he managed to go a few meters ago. The man was incredibly angry and promised Nahai that he would end up for this circus. The monk replied that he would like to see if he would be able to finish the Lord of the Dark Mountain Heishan. Huan was surprised how quickly the teammate joined the role. The real Dark Towers began to use force on the opponent and plunged it into darkness. Observers realized that this is the technique: invisible corpses that use invisible blades that leave neither shadow nor traces behind. The elder looked and could not understand where they got, and thought they were surrounded. At this point, before the eyes of Zhang Kui appeared children who were suffering from pain. Their bodies were soaked in grey acid, and the faces were cut with horror. The Dark Taos shouted that no one could withstand him and ordered the opponent to die. He sent a flock of dead children to the monk, but therefore managed to avoid fights with them. The man approached the opponent, grabbed him by his neck, and shouted that he was more vicious than all demons. The monk grabbed the umbrella and was going to plug with him into a dark fog of a pathetic Taos. Observers realized that a man was using a dark artifact, a valuable treasure, and suggested that he was really a lord of the Dark Mount Heishan. The family demons saw that the invisible ones used in the technique of the enemy began to disappear. This meant that the Dark Taos lost. Everyone was convinced when the monk left the fog, holding his head in his hands. Realizing that Zhang Kui was going to go, those three surrounded him from different sides and asked to wait. The monk asked what they wanted to assume that they wanted to pick up the defeated head. The eldest of them said that this Dark Taos did not put anything from himself, unlike her husband, and asked if he did not mind to make friends with them. Huan Elder tried to assure the partner that it was not necessary to do so because they got their head and no more reason to interact with these people. Laughing at what he heard, Zhang Kui agreed, saying that he likes this idea. After this answer, he threw his head of Dark Taos into his hands, an extremely surprised partner. With a cheerful mood, he suggested that new comrades eat, and those with joy supported his idea. When tying his head into the bag, the demon thought that his partner was running through something and realized that he needed to be more careful. After a while, the gazebo table was covered with delicious food and new friends sat down to dine. During the meal, the eldest of three began to represent before the monk of his comrades. Pointing to a man who had a necklace of skulls, he named his name, Miao Shan, a Buddha of joy. When the turn reached the woman, he called her Chingu, which was also known by the surname of the Heart. These names were very famous in the district, and the monk asked if they were not interested in finding out what he was the head of the Dark Taos. The man replied that she was promised a large enough reward and that in this way he wanted to make money. All three were alert immediately, not realizing what he wants to say, because for their heads also promise a great reward. However, the monk cheerfully told them not to worry and promised that he would not hurt, because he did not need it. The elder was surprised that the man was such a joker, because he thought that Heishan was a decent person. After removing the handle from the blade, Zhang Kui recalled that because of them, his familial mouse came to an end, and asked if they were going to compensate it. All three were surprised that the brazen dared to say so. They were also surprised that his aura was darker than them. The elder replied that Miaoshan did it by accident and assured that he would take care of everything and find a suitable weapon for Taos. The monk smiled in response and politely asked to try because he does not like to wait long. After the meal, the man was very drunk, so the servants instructed him to take him to the room. Upon arrival in the room, the guy said that if the monk needs something, then let him call him immediately. In the room, he was expected by a partner that he watched the house all the time and found something. According to the dark aura of this place, he learned that a very strong demon was concealed in the temple. The family demon turned to the monk and asked if he really wanted to go with these people side by side. He did not understand why it was necessary because they already have a dark Taos head and you can turn back. The man resolutely replied that he was going to stop this demon, which can bring a great destruction. The family demon was dissatisfied with such a response and suggested that Zhang Kui was looking for death. The man cheerfully replied that the end is still the same, so you can safely discard fears. The elder asked the monk that he knew about it at all and whether he wanted to understand what it started at all. He began to explain that everyone wants to get the strength of the Qi family, which is why they are looking for reincarnation of one of the members of the clan. And the best way is to enter and personally see all newborns. The monk guessed that these people took control of the whole city to ensure unobstructed monitoring of children. The elder was afraid that demons were far from one kingdom to get rid of ordinary people. Hearing this story, Zhang Kui decided that he was obliged to deal with all this. The demon suggested to start from the city of Haishui, but the monk no longer listened and was about to sleep. At dawn, he blamed the man who spoke to him yesterday, and he dared to fall asleep in the middle of the conversation. In response to these words, Zhang Kui said that in this way, he wanted to show his indifference. After the conversation, they left the room selected and went to see what the city was showing. On the way, they saw the merchants selling meat buns, and women with children are happily buying them. Other residents of the city also carelessly lived life, traded with market workers. The monk was disappointed that each of these people was indifferent to the situation in their hometown. Recalling the death of all his brothers, the family demon wished it would be great if people like Zhang Kui were more. He tried to translate the topic while avoiding questions from the monk and asked if he could help him. The man hugged his partner by his shoulders and announced that he needed to go back. The monk wanted the demon asked the minister to do him a service to find some undisclosed things and hang them on the lord of the Dark Mount Haitian. Huan's elder was surprised from what he heard and did not understand what this guy thinks. Walking in the city, the monk thought that people and spirits were forced to coexist with each other, which causes catastrophes. The demon runs on the throne, and the inhabitants do not have any business. He thought that Heishui people not only get sick, but also lose the meaning of their lives. The reflection of the man was interrupted by the messenger who came to inform that the Daos Yunshu invites the monk to himself. And in the end, the man responded to the old day invitation to the evening meal. Yunshu was dissatisfied with the delay of the monk, and for this he was entrusted with penalty cups with alcohol. One man, watching their meal, said colleague that it was necessary to track the origin of Zhang Kui as soon as possible and then deal with it. He believed that if this scoundrel plans to penetrate in Haishi without the knowledge of the Lord, he overestimates too much. Sitting on the roof, the monk remembered that he was fed meat during these 3 days and wanted to send girls. He understood that if it continues, it would be very difficult to hide your true intentions. These scoundrels were incredibly annoyed, so the man wanted to kill them. He recalled that 2 monsters killed on the road brought him 2 points and decided to see that he was now with a balance. His arsenal was not bad, but it was still not enough to overcome these 3. If Zhang Kui had a blade, there would be much less problems with their elimination. In the morning, the monk heard a knock on the door and learned from the messenger that the Daos Yunshu wanted to see him. It seemed to the boy that his gentleman remembered that he had prepared a surprise for a man. So he liked the news, he hugged the guy by his shoulders and pulled him with him. They began their greetings with the Haishan monk by recognizing his military merit. Yunxiu learned about a man that he was erased more than 30 villages from the face of the earth, and it was quite unexpected for them. Zhang Kui was very angry because they dared to check the information about him. Now he realized that Wan's elder was not in vain. The old man asked him not to merge, saying that they just needed to know more about the monk. After that, he clapped his hands and asked the servant to bring a gift. Zhang Kui warned these people that if they are not satisfied with their compensation, then do not expect a mercy. Opening the box, he felt the incredibly killer aura from the resulting blade. The monk pulled out a gift from the case and waved it, saying that this sword was quite good. Yongxiu reported that this blade is called Luli. He was a treasure of the kingdom of Van, on the site of which this building stands. There are many hooks on the sword. It is quite sharp and cuts everything in its path, so the monk Haitian is exactly suitable. Zhang Kui waved a blade to the Miaoshan side and the Hearts of Hearts, who barely had time to evade the attack. From this movement, the wall behind them began to crack. The monk liked the gift incredibly. It was impressed so much that this sword is mighty. Only one with a blade of the blade, he took the twos out of himself. They realized that the man was very strong and it would be good to get it with him. The Yongxiu Daos asked if the Haishan monk liked the gift and whether he was apologizing. The man replied that this sword was quite good, but it was not enough for him, which caused the surprise on the old face. But the monk assured that he had nothing to worry about and asked them to just pick him up where he could have experienced a new weapon. Taos, in response, stressed that the places where demons live are considered very dangerous. Zhang Kui assured that it was not necessary to worry about it and simply asked him to give him away. Yongxiu and partners were also going to deal with all this chaos, so he was wondering if the monk Haishan would dare to go to the city where they were going. A few hours later, the man organized a detachment to the Tin Mountain. When they almost reached the place, he asked Zhang Kui to look at the top. They needed it. What the monk saw himself was not like a mountain, but asked why she was only one here. Thinking that a man would laugh, Yunxiu reported that this vertex is a place of burial of all sorts of influential people in which the cave has recently opened. From there, it began to leak hot, dark forces spread everywhere. And once two cultivators who loved to fun with corpses were injured, and as a result, nothing good. That is why Daos Yongxiu called with him Miaoshan and Qinggu. The man wanted to deal with this den. The old man added that two were not only cultivators, but also tried to use the cave force to spread horror. Hearing about the struggle for the territory with the help of dark forces, the monk could not understand why the demons did not help Taos. He considered this story strange and promised that after the unclean was understood, they would not be left alive, and when the dark aura was absorbed, everyone would end. Zhang Kui was thinking that you could find some treasures there. They would be very useful to him. In his portal, a man could throw everything except for living creatures. The resulting artifact is not quite suitable for wearing on his back, so he would not hurt to find something else. When the detachment reached the foot of the mountain, Daos Yunxiu stopped and began orders. The entrance to the right place was further dependent on Qinggu, so he asked the girl to use his strength. She put her huge bag on the floor, opened it, and released the spirit that was hiding there. The men were scared and thought that it is a creature consisting of human skin. However, Qinggu reassured them, notifying that it was not, and this woman with a corpse of the demon. She caught up with the creature and opened her back to climb inside the wrapper and then merged with that spirit. Qinggu looked around and told everyone the attendees to follow her, and then quickly ran forward. The further they moved, the more the monk seemed that something was wrong with this place. Having reached a certain place, the old man ordered the detachment to stop and get started. Then his subordinates took into his hands wooden spears and began to comb the ground ahead. Subsequently, they discovered the disgusting body of the demon in the ground. This find was the purpose of their search. The old man reported that traps began from this place and ordered to be more careful. The Yongxiu Taox folded his fingers and directed the light beam to the body of the corpse to destroy it. The monk was very interested to know where the old man learned that the demon was hidden in this place. The aura that came from the Yongxiu body was very strange and caused a man's feeling of dajaja. The old man saw the entrance to the cave, pointed to him with his finger, and announced everyone which was their destination. The Taos ordered everyone to come and promised that after the mission was fulfilled, each of the detachment members would receive a remuneration. The men listened to the words of the commander and immediately went to the entrance to the cave. The monk believed that something was wrong, because if there really is doing something with corpses, will the Taos dare to intervene? He suggested that the old man wanted to use them all as cannon. But the man ran straight behind him, and if something happens, he will be at times faster. Taos reported that in the gorge it was very dangerous and insisted that everyone be extremely careful. They have been going on for a long time, and Qinggu wondered where all the enemies went. The old man suggested that they may be hiding deeper, but Miao-shan asked not to play with them. Yunxiu instructed them to just go inside. Did not matter. They would meet someone or not, their strength would still agree. Considering the strokes of the two, she realized that their impatience was not iron. The subordinate found something very strange in one of the gorges and called everyone else so that they would come there. The monk had never been in such places before. He was very interested to know what was there. But what turned out to be in that slit immediately dispelled him with all the cheerful mood. Everyone saw an incomprehensible thing that consisted of a pile of bloody human bodies and was like a beating heart. With a serious expression of the face of the Dao's Yunxiu announced that unfortunately they were late. Miao-shan is excitedly noted that this is completely different from what previously agreed. The monk was surprised when he heard this durable, because it could mean that Yunxiu was wrong. Then the old man said that the Lord should appear personally, and his body began to change his appearance. Aura began to impart from her husband, and the monk realized that the Yunxiu Daos became obsessed. Everyone but him began to run away from the cave because they understood that it was all means. The man was not going to give them so simply to escape. With the help of his power, he blocked the path of retreat. Miao-shan realized that it would not work out, and it would be necessary to act differently. Zhang Kui turned to the detachment and said that they had only one way out. It was not to fight with life, but to death. The old man stressed that the guy was thinking correctly, but also said it depends on whether they could win. Miao-shan realized that escape is a sure death, and the struggle could give them a chance to win. Therefore, there is no other choice in the detachment than to fight. Obsessed their manifestation seemed pathetic, he used power and began to prepare for the attack. The old man sent their side with magic. The monk managed to protect himself with the shield, but Qinggu could not avoid the impact. The enemy squeezed his fist, and as a result, only a puddle of blood remained in place. An obsessed man spookily told the opponents that they would soon see what would happen to them. The old man was only able to break Zhang Kui in one blow. If he did not reflect the attack, he might have died at all. The obsessed recognized that the monk was quite strong if he could resist, and suggested that he join him. The man believed that there would be some advantages from such cooperation. Zhang Kui did not think it would benefit from such cooperation because the old aura was not so dangerous. The man looked at the monk with his nasty red eyes and asked why he did not meet the Lord. The members of the detachment were kneeling one by one and began to be pleased with the Lord that he would spare them. The Lord replied that he did not need their lives, but just that men agree to him. Miao-shan has been scared that they would definitely be useful in his business. The man told the subjects that those people in the province initially came to the cave for a completely different purpose, but seemed to have changed their intentions. He did not even understand that it was a mass of bodies, but the dark aura of this thing was incredibly strong, and around it was the presence of hatred. The obsessed stressed that after the transformation, the body received good abilities and ordered the subjects to destroy it. They began to execute his assignments, but in fact had other plans. The Buddha removed his beads and threw them into an incomprehensible mass. The monk considered an old idiot who did not evaluate the situation at all and promised that his death was not far off. All you had to do was wait until Miao-shan began to act. After the Buddha threw his beads, they began to absorb this mass and there was nothing to destroy. The Lord approached the man and struck him in his back, from which the blood flowed from his mouth. He turned to other subjects and asked who would continue to destroy this body. Doomed men realized that without the power of Miao-shan, they could do nothing. Finally, the old man turned to Zhang Kui and asked what he was going to do now. He stressed that the layer of corpses continues to absorb people and will soon begin to dissolve them. The monk understood the situation and at this time was thinking that all the evil spirits are in this ball, and if they absorb their aura, it may be possible to return. Remembering how this mass dissolved the Buddha beads, the man also noted that it was impossible to act recklessly. If the monk goes to that thing, then the old may not be able to understand. Zhang Kui had one idea, and he decided to try it. The man reproached that he was stinking here and said that he was beginning to be nailed. After these words, the monk went down and stood directly opposite the ominous thing. Aura from her was too powerful. The old man told Buddhi to step and break the ball, and Zhang Kui would then deal with everything. Miao-shan replied that he was somehow not on his own and suggested that he may be able to handle it himself. The Lord asked once again whether he was not about to go, reproaching that in this case it was no use. In fear of dying at the hands of the old man, the Buddha went down, shouting that he would go right now. The man turned to the monk Haitian and uncertainly asked if he could handle it alone. Zhang Kui was angry that if they did nothing now, they would not get there at all. At this time, the man absorbed aura with his body, which was felt like a piercing cold. But the corpse air was full of poison, so he realized that he could not last for so long. The whole situation was so strange that the monk didn't even know what to expect. The man addressed the Buddha and stressed that there is still a chance of survival, and most importantly, not to miss the moment. He suggested that the viscera may not be so powerful, and they would be able to win. Thanks to his technique, Zhang Kui could see everything through, so he stressed that if Miao Shan does not believe, he could just wait until he was killed. Looking at the Haishan monk, the Buddha believed that the boy had incredible abilities, and you can try to believe him. The Lord aggressively addressed the man and reproached him for standing and did nothing. Miao Shan said excitedly in response that he is just waiting for the relevant moment. The man took his scepter, spread it, and sent it to the body of a hostile creature and hit its flesh. He shouted that with the help of the blessing and appearance of the Buddha, he would break this ball now. The monk managed to deceive the man, but he did not manage to see how weak the body is in front of them. The Lord praised them for their good work and ordered them to continue, reproaching that it was only necessary to press them as everything goes right away. The Buddha did not think that this thing would be so weak and believed that may still be possible to get out of here. However, his temporary joy disappeared when the scepter came across something and could not move on. The skin was quite solid, but Miao Shan still believed that he would handle everything. However, at that moment, he saw a giant eye in front of his face, which began to open little by little. Both Zhang Kui and the Buddha were much scared of what they saw, because they did not expect it at all. From that eye, something like a tentacle began to appear, and a frightened man grabbed. Fortunately, the monk escaped such a fate, but the Buddha began to shout in all his voice from fear. The terrible creature, grabbing his body, opened her mouth and pulled her husband there. After the Buddha was eaten, the monster closed his mouth, looked at Zhang Kui, and pulled his tentacles. However, the monster failed to realize his intentions, because in the next moment, he could not find the boy, because he went somewhere. Fortunately, the monk has long learned the technique of cloning and could make himself invisible, which this time saved his life. But the man understood that the level of these two skills was too low to deceive this creature. The Lord was curious that the man was going to do further. He didn't threaten him, because this creature did not pay attention to him. However, the man was going to draw her attention. He jumped into the air to get closer to the eye of the demon. The old Yongxiu rushed to the creature to take its account. The monster grabbed his body and absorbed. Zhang Kui felt that his dark aura had grown several times. It seemed interesting. The man understood that it was not important who would win, because in this case, he would only be death. The cave began to shake, so he decided that now the right moment to run. When the monk came out of there, the top of the mountain began to crack on the wreckage, and the destruction spread throughout its square. The man believed that that creature would have to die and knew that if she appeared again, he would become a terrible demon. The body of the Lord has increased at times, and a dark layer began to build around it. Zhang Kui saw it and realized that the monster had not died yet, so he decided to flee more. Suddenly, a huge hand came out of the mountain, reaching the body of the Lord. She grabbed him and pulled him back into the cave, not giving a chance to escape. Watching this, Zhang Kui could not understand what was happening to this world at all. Before his eyes, a large mountain appeared, more like a tomb, whose top was destroyed. The contract was terminated. After all that happened, the monk returned to the city of Haishui and stopped at the local bar. He remembered that huge hand and made suggestions that maybe a mountain is really a tomb. After the destruction of the cave, a slightly huge, possibly associated with the case in his hometown. The monk didn't understand that it was not so much with this world. The city began to spread the news that the Yongxiu Daos came into conspiracy with demons to sow chaos in Haishui, and that everyone obeyed his order and destroyed the monsters, destroying the statues. After the fall of the main demon, others appeared. It seemed that people were very dissatisfied. Responsible for order in Zhou Duwei ordered the subjects to surround the building and not let anyone go. One man who was carried on palanquin looked and shouted that he asked not to touch things from the warehouse. Zhou Duwei turned to Mr. Tai and asked why the man came to this place. He replied that the Lord of the Faceless Demons was dead, So the high-ranking official can now do everything he wants, and again asked not to touch the composition. And he promised that Mr. Liu would thank it. After listening to this conversation, the monk concluded that Heishi's roots spread far inside, and as soon as the ruler fell, the rats pulled out. Zhang Kui recognized among the crowd of a familiar man, Wang Hu from the palace. He did not understand what he was doing here. After all, there is no lord of faceless demons, so it was unclear where he gathered. The man decided to follow him to learn more about his intentions. In one of the monsters, the monk stopped Wang Hu, asked where he was going and whether he was looking for his master. The man wanted to try to escape, but on the other hand, he expected a double Zhang Kui. Wang Hu could not understand what was happening and then guessed it was a demonic skill. The dark monk promised that he would not touch her husband if he told who his gentleman. Wang Hu made concessions and replied with a mockery that he was the most influential person in the wealthy. The monk remembered how Yuan once said that Hun Shou, a lord of the capital, did not care about anything, but his son came into conspiracy with demons. He allowed Wang Hu to go, thinking that not only demons are creating problems, but also in the hearts of people the chaos. In the evening, the man returned to the establishment from which it all started, climbed on the roof and waited for a meeting. A moment later, the eunuch joined him. He asked the monk if he finished and what happened to the Temple of White Clouds. Zhang Kui had something to tell, and he could not decide where to start. From the impersonal of the demons, Mr. Liu, or from the ruler of Prajzhou. Pouring water, the governor replied that the man could start with what he wants. He is all into account. Zhang Kui told about everything he had to face and asked the official if he was scared. In replied that not at all, they just set the task of cleaning the Prajzhou. In addition, there were rumors that there was even a secret ancient kingdom in this city. It is very important because it is connected with the founder of the dynasty, so the governor emphasized that the Zhang monk should not be told about it. The man asked if explosive equipment was also somehow related to this founder. In could not understand what he implies by explosive. Zhang said it was a speech from his hometown, but she is considered extinct, so no one else expresses. The monk replied excitedly what he was in mind whether there were any treasures in that kingdom. Now the eunuch realized what he was talking about. Zhang Kui was already familiar with ancient weapons, but besides it, there were other things called ancient artifacts. The reason why the imperial court was able to absorb all is several powerful artifacts capable of destroying the sky and the earth. Demons could not resist them, so it led to balance. Zhang Kui asked the interlocutor if he believes that these things could be found in the ancient temple. In was not sure, but if it is true, then their chances of cleaning the Prinzo would grow significantly, so they need to get there. The monk could not believe that ancient artifacts were so powerful that they were able to exterminate all evil. The eunuch also said that you need to find a degenerate person and bring it, thus maintaining stability in the city, so as not to cause deaths and injuries among people. He was not sure about ancient artifacts, but suspected that a turning point could occur. Zhang Kui had no idea what could happen, but in any case, he was going to stay in this city and protect it. The governor, in response to the herd he heard, he pulled him with alcohol and thanked. Finally, he wished that they still have the opportunity to drink together. Zhang Kui also hoped for it. Among the gorges of the forest near the city, an old lady gathered home who carried a handbag on her back. She wanted to come as soon as possible because she was worried that her babies could get tired of waiting. Suddenly, the body engulfed unspeakable fear because a ghost appeared behind the female likeness. The ghost asked the old man what the point was that the old man is drawn at such an old age and promised that she would show paradise if she followed her. The woman began to beg for the pardon. She had 3 grandchildren whose parents were dead, so she was their only support. The ghost grabbed her throat and replied that she also prayed for a mercy earlier, but no one heard her. The old woman continued to plead with the girl so that she would not kill her, but was indifferent to her tears. The woman began to say goodbye to her life, and suddenly the ghost before her went somewhere. On the top of the rock was Zhang Kui with the head of the demon. He told the old man to hurry home because his grandchildren were waiting for her. The woman stood on his knees and sincerely thanked him for the salvation, and he went proudly. The monk was thinking that this city lived in fear because of a faceless master of demons, who killed more than 20 people in one night. It was just awful. In the morning, residents in the city center caused a noise, knocking on the drum. They reported that last night they met demons. Zhou Duwei could not understand how possible, because the faceless master of demons died. He was worried that it could mean that the rumors of the ruler's death reached a stronger enemy. Tai said that it was not necessary to spend the nerves and reported that the corpses had knife wounds, which indicated that the exorcist had dealt with them. Zhou Duwei could not understand where he could come from their lands, but the world was large enough, and it was possible that someone really worked out the city. Tai assured that he had nothing to worry about. He promised that by the evening he would definitely find an exorcist, and if he tried to get to them, he would deal with him in place. Zhang Kui was sitting in his room, and suddenly he sneezed. One told the boy that maybe someone was discussing him. He was indifferent to it, because it could not be liked by everyone with the Chinese currency RMB. The demon did not understand what he meant. Monk distracting him from thought by a request to sharpen his sword. Tonight, he had to go and kill several evil spirits. The beast asked why the man so persistently continues his mission to clean the city from uncleanness, because he is not his inhabitant, and people's lives and their death should not be so important to him. Considering the moon, the monk replied that there was one beautiful song in his hometown. She sounded like this: "When you see a lie, they cry loudly when it's time to act. Do not waste time." After these words, the man jumped out of the window and went to hunt demons and ghosts. In addition to protecting Heishai residents, the monk also sought to gather more experience. In this world where the evil wanders to freedom, he does not survive without the right power. The residents of the city began to hunt demons again. They attacked everyone without passing, both women and children. The monsters came out of the forest in the desire to grasp the prey, but their intentions were interfered with a dark monk who killed evil one by one. The inhabitants thanked the stranger for salvation, kneeling before him. The monk did not have enough skills, and he had to kill even more monsters and spirits. Suddenly, he felt a heavy aura and began to look to find out where she came from. In one of the houses of the city, 3 beauties were fascinating about a girl who played a flute under the moon. The monk heard their voices, quickly found them, and seemed to be expected demons. Before that, only freaks happened to the man, but today, he was lucky. This time, they were beautiful girls. 3 beauties offered a man to relax with them, promising that he was feeling the earthly bliss as if in paradise. The monk agreed to their proposal and replied that he always liked to be on top of heaven. The girls surrounded him, asking if he was tired of the road, and suggested their help in removing clothes. One of them told him to just lie down, promising that they would be caught on him. The monk wished it to taste, even if it would lead to heavenly ecstasy. He activated his vision and found that their appearance left much to be desired. These were 3 devils which, approaching closer to his neck, discovered their true likeness. Now it was too late to remedy the situation, so the monk took the monsters of the head. Moving on, he came across a man with a fan who told him that he did not understand the situation at all. The experience of the monk grew very slowly, and finding a demon in front of him, he immediately attacked him. The confused man reacted in time to the movement of the opponent and evaded the sword. He was not going to joke with a dark monk and began to flee quickly, but it was even more tired of Zhang Kui to a fight, because the man thought that he would have a lot of experience for this demon. Tai was again able to avoid a stroke with a sword with the help of parrot in the air. He shouted the monk that he would now be taught. He was indifferent who before him, because if a man violated the law in Haishui, then he must be punished. Zhang Kui answered the opponent that his head was working well and he just needed it. He approached the enemy and was going to attack his new weapons again. However, the man managed to avoid the impact every time. His reaction was at a high level. Tai told the monk that he was doomed to die because he is sick and spreads negative energy. Zhang Kui never heard of the fight against demons, and spirits was considered a violation of order, so he continued to fight with the intention of picking up his opponent's head. The monk did not understand what was wrong with this guy. His movement was strange, and every movement mixed with a spell. It was really very reasonable. He had the feeling that this man had an endless power. His ice-piercing aura seemed too cunning. Tai approached the monk, blocked him with a sword, and asked him to stop for a minute. The monk responded to his request, and at that moment they both left a few meters ago. Tai introduced himself to a local inspector from the Bureau of Xintian, 12 number. The man asked the opponent if he did not want to join them to defend peace in the area. The monk saw that this guy has great skills, but if they continue, he would be able to quench him with his technique and win. However, Zhang Kui was aware that now it is not time to resist the Bureau of Xintian. In addition, not all of them are bad people. Tai reported that Liu Gonggu promised the AI technique, and if he receives it, he will be able to share with all the students. Therefore, it would be profitable for a man to join them and become part of this big cause. Although this proposal was tempted, the service of the old eunuch did not suit him. Tai asked the man whether he was keeping the balance between good and evil. In his opinion, he did not look like a gentleman. He also stressed that today's kindness did not help anyone and only accelerates death. Zhang Kui did not like his words, so he warned the enemy that if he did not go now, he would have to die here. Tai replied that if fate decides to reduce them again, it would happen that, and said goodbye to the monk. If it were not for a whole detachment of the Xintian and the strange technique of the stranger's battle, the monk would gladly join and have learned from him. After the battle, Tai came to a place where he had to meet with one man to report him everything. Zhou Dui asked how everything went and whether the personality of the person managed to know. Tai reported that it is still unclear who he is, but not their person. In any case, he believed that he would die soon. Now they needed to wait for the 9 ghosts of the Unju to destroy the old demon, which was at the level of the Valley of Evil. The monk shake from himself when he returned to the room. Suddenly, Huan ran to him with the news that one of their messengers brought a letter from Mr. Yu. Zhang Kui asked what was written in it. Recently, the minister has often helped him, and ever he wanted to invite him to drink in the Chinese palace. The demon reported that in the letter, Mr. Yu written that 2 magazines, Zhenoho, are heading through their direction through the city of Xingzhou. The great king of ghosts is now dead. So many unclean sought to seize the city of Blackwater. Many children were born every year, and perhaps among them was a person degenerate in this world. Demons hunted them to achieve large nirvana technique and become immortal. The guards saw that the gate was approaching an evil cult. There were too many enemies, so they realized that they would not win and Blackwater would fall. Zhang Kui approached one of the guards and assured that there was nothing to worry about. They just need to rely on him. The man used his spiritual vision to evaluate the ability of enemies. He was going to fight to protect the city and gain a lot of experience. The monk was pleased that he was lucky this time. There were 3 powerful enemies among the mighty enemies. The monsters began to produce a green couple, directing her to her husband. Zhang Kui turned to the demons and advised them not to resist, but to honor their death. The dark monk clenched the sword in his hands and moved to the largest of the members of the dark cult. The guards were shocked, watching this guy's actions. They believed that he did not survive and that he had to run. However, in a moment, Zhang Kui dumped a demon's head in front of the gate. He turned to the guards and, wiping his hands from dust, advised them to install it at the gate so that other demons did not come. With a surprised mouth, men watched how happy the monk was about to go. Finally, the dark monk thanked them for their service and told them to continue in the same spirit. The guards were still impressed with the stranger killed 3 demons in a matter of moments and assumed that he could be a man with Zhang Guo. The monk jumped out the window of the Huan house and reported that he had returned at the moment when the demon was about to go to bed. Every day, more and more, the more than the boys came from Yintianjian, and the elder was worried that among them there would be those who would not approve of them. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people he was considered a demon, and many they didn't like. The monk told the man so that he just follows him, and if someone is disturbing Huan, he would surely protect him. In the next moment, Zhang Kui pulled a shiny ball and reported that he had found her in the head of the monster whom it killed today. The elder recognized the thing in his hands. It is Yaodan, a real treasure that can help demons in training and become a great support for them. The monk said he would give a ball, but before that he wanted to know some information in Huan. Zhang Kui looked at Yaodan and said that for a long time he was disturbed by one question. He didn't understand why, although they were all monsters. Some are as smart as humans, others semi-pep demonons, and some have no mind at all. Why is such a difference between them? The elder asked the man if he would definitely give him this devilish elixir. The monk replied that if he continues to delay, he would give it to their dogs, who waited at the bottom. The demon stated that this treasure is weight of gold, so you should not be so impatient. Although different monsters had their unique teaching methods, they all followed one of the 3 main ways. The first way is a physical training that helps to improve the shape, giving a huge body size and strength. Such monsters feed on blood and flesh, train quickly, but they lack intelligence. The second way, like Huan, is a full moon worship and discover your mind, gaining access to the treasury of the spiritual world of monsters. They believed in the legend that the wisest demons live on the moon. The third way is to access the treasury of the spiritual world of monsters by turning into a person and using his methods for spiritual development. Zhang Kui did not understand what the benefit of this is because the human body is so weak and defenseless that it would be better to become a powerful monster. The first two ways, as a rule, cannot pass the test of heaven unless they are kissed. Only by becoming a person can you have a chance to survive. The human race lives very little, but their meridians respond to the celestial cycles. They are real living beings, enlivened by the spirit of the earth and the sky. In the morning, soldiers cleaned the remains of yesterday's battle with 3 monsters. They were dissatisfied with the stench left after the battle. Local officials were dissatisfied. Tai said that the monk could enjoy his victory for several days, but he considered stupid what he thinks he could keep the city without reaching the height of practice. They decided to immediately announce everything that happened, a great man. The events are transferred to the temple, over which the crow flew and left a black feather. The priest stroked the little boy on his head, saying that he would get better when he drinks the medicine. The parents bowed to the man as a sign of gratitude for their help and left the temple. Raven sat on the priest on his shoulder and reported everything that happened in the city, then flew back. The man believed that there was nothing to worry about because the monk was just a human race. But he was shocked, learning that the great lord of demons died. The third eye was revealed on his forehead, which suggested that it could be a trap, and first advised the intelligence. If the city Blackwater is now without the owner, he can easily make him his own. The family demon was dissatisfied with the fact that the monk pulled him with him for hunting monsters. Zhang Kui took it specifically to see who he has been watching a man for a long time. These were creatures at the level of the ghost theater. On a midnight transshipment, they left behind paper stretchers. It was the demon of this level that he was waiting to gain as much experience and points as possible. He jumped out of the trees into the air, going to pour out the caravan of the unclean. They were very slow, not at the ghostly theater, and it was greatly disappointed by the dark monk. The demons were a little lost, but in the next moment, they turned and started a clash with the enemy. The monk faced a sword with an ugly creature with pale blue skin and red eyes. The man rejected the demon by a powerful attack, and other members of the caravan hurried to help. Zhang Kui was just rejoiced in such enthusiasm on their part. He was only for the monster to call his brothers because he wanted to fight from his heart. Watching the fight, the family demon was agitated by the thoughts that all young people are so cruel now. The monk dealt with the monsters that were out. He was disappointed with his thoughts that everything turned out to be much easier than thinking. He approached Palanquin, waiting until someone came out, but there was nothing to hear from there. Going closer, he rejected the blind and saw the skeleton of the mother holding the baby in her arms. The man took them in his arms and promised to give them a place where they could live safely. Considering their grave, the monk said that this is just another terrible event for ordinary people. Life can be much worse than for ghosts. He was concerned that thanks to this killing, he received another point of skills. Walking on the road, Zhang called a family demon and said that everything today and it's time to go. Suddenly, a shadow snake attacked the boy and began to wrap his right hand. One followed by even more shadow vipers that continued to climb into his body. Huan has learned this skill. It is a unique skill of the snake demon Chan-san, which does not stop until it kills the target. He fought with the faceless king of spirits for control of the Black City, but was defeated. Since then, the monster began to travel, and it was unclear when the monk had time to get it off. Zhang Kui decided to use the skill of life, light of life, against them. Shen Shen Guan Shu creates a protective light that can withstand usual attacks for 10 minutes. As the level of magic increases, it can be improved to the level of all laws in the world will not be able to withstand, and all evil forces will not be able to approach, which sounds truly impressive. But it was only a temporary protection. It was necessary to solve the problem with Chan-san, which prevents him. The monk tried to discover the enemy with the help of his vision, but nothing was possible. Huan said it was not worth looking for him because he could take people from 100 miles with his magic. Although Chan-san was defeated, it is still strong as a terrible demon that lives on the verge of disgust. The Zhang monk suggested getting around the city sooner and destroying all the monster repositories. Lao Huan asked a man whether he was sure and whether he just wants to play. In order to become entrenched in Xingzhou, He needs to increase his strength, and for this purpose it is necessary to achieve full possession of the technique of guidance as soon as possible. Subsequently, on a 10-soap slope, they found a group of people who slept. Lao Huan said that these were creatures that were taken out of one village 80 years ago. They ate people and gradually turned into demons. The dark monk rushed out of place and hurried to deal with all the flock of monsters. He grabbed the first of them and killed mercilessly using his recently received equipment. Other demons heard the noise and immediately woke up and ran to the enemy who destroyed their friend. The dark monk understood that he was no longer a people, but real monsters who need to get rid of. He destroyed all man-demons with several sword swings and went in search of other enemies. The officials, in the meantime, discussing how intentionally forced Chan San to see the actions of Zhang Kui, and hoped that he was now suffering from the curse of a terrible snake. They were convinced that with this level of practice, the monk would not be able to withstand the old monster. Tai said he heard rumors that 9 spiritual creatures could come at any time, and who knows who would run away in this case. They did not worry at all who to kill, but to whom to save their lives. They just wanted money. The guard was unexpectedly burst into their room reporting that the news came. The men noticed that he was very excited and ordered to report them. The garrison reported that they saw the shadow of Zhang Kui in Wanlun, and intelligence found that all the monsters were nearby. Zhou Dui did not understand how possible, because that man had to be struck by the evil curse of Chan San and accordingly dead. Tai realized that they were deeply underestimated. Perhaps their opponent had some ways of protection, so it was not worth the risk. Following the messenger, another person who had a cold aura was included in the room. The woman reproached that people Liu Gungo were not raised at all, because they did not even bring an old grandmother a glass of water. These included the predecessor of 9 children. Tai Chin Yi bowed and congratulated it on arriving. She came closer to her husband and grabbed him for her chin, saying that he has a good look. The last place where the monk dealt with the monsters became the rocks in which he stopped for a short time. Huan said heard rumors that most of the things and entities that live here are living things. The monk destroyed all the famous demons in the vicinity of Haishui a day. This was enough for at least a few decades to be safe there. Huan felt an incredibly strong aura near him. This Zhang Kui began the process of cultivation that grew rapidly. These skills have increased by 2 levels and 3 points remained, but unfortunately, 5 points needed to reach the 5th level. If the guy can increase this skill to the 10th level, then he will be able to use the skill of opening boundaries, which will allow him to achieve incredible strength. The monk suggested that the demon return to the hotel and dinner the hot meat, which he agreed. At this time, he thought that it was necessary to find some kind of place where you could put on monsters. In recent days, the hero has doubled his energy, so Huan was thinking that if he joins him, he may be able to find his place in this world. Zhang Kui noticed his gaze and asked if he finally noticed his beauty, glowing in his nose. The dark monk said that he allows him to admire the beauty, because there are not many in this world. On the way to the hotel, the man enveloped a terrible feeling that a huge snake was looking directly at him. This creature turned to a dark monk and said that if he is here, then let him not go. The family demon noticed a sudden numbness of the boy and asked what happened to him. The monk asked if the 2-men village was the territory of the snake demon. One, looking at the plate, shocked that it was so. There was a Chan San in this city everywhere, and the elder told the guy that he would run faster. However, the dark monk couldn't do it because he knew that the snake demon had already noticed him. The man went forward, finally saying that if he survives, Huan will be guilty of drinking. Then he looked around and told the partner that he would rather he heal until it is too late. There was nothing visible around because the whole village was covered with the magic of a snake demon. He approached the temple of the king of the dragons, whose spiritual air was strong, where many turtles and even snakes dared to live. The shadow monster continued to attack the monk. He spoke and angered the enemy not to pretend, but to go out and fight. Chan San acknowledged that a man had a good method of self-defense and asked what family he was from. Zhang Kui suggested that this old man had accepted him as a student from a great doctrine. It could be used as an advantage, because now the monk could not resist him. The man proudly replied that the demon is not yet worthy to know the names of his relatives. Chan San could not understand who he was, and if he was killed, he could attract extra attention. The old man said he doesn't matter who the guy was in origin and added that he would leave him with respect for his ancestors. He set the condition that he would leave his protection technique and came from here. But the monk could not simply convey his technique because she belonged to him. It is not easy to get out of this situation, and if the battle does not help, and it will not work, then there is only one way. Zhang Kui replied that he would hand him to the doctrine that the master handed him, and climbed his hand to his belt. Chan San understood that if he gets it, his or her own protection will improve much. The sharp movement of the monk rejected something to the side and shouted that if a man wanted the doctrine so, then let him go and take it. The snake demon instantly grabbed a thrown piece of paper while Zhang Kui tried to come up with something. Chan San was satisfied with the received, hoping that now the doctrine is in his hands. However, an unpleasant surprise was waiting for him. A piece of paper was depicted on the piece of paper. While the serpent was in frenzy, the man decided to discover all the useful skills. He opened the ability to jump on a stone, which made it easy to cross the mountains and slopes and to move at land at a speed of flight. At the maximum level, it was possible to study the skills of flight in the wind and cloud call. The freezing spell is an active skill that requires 100 units of mana for use. It causes the goal to stay for 1 minute, but the higher the opponent's level, the greater the likelihood of failure and reduction of time. The snake demon was angry that the monk dared to escape, mocking him. He immediately chased after him. In response, the man used a freezing spell, forcing the enemy's body to stop for a moment. The snake felt that the opponent had used some technique that sealed his vitality. He suggested that this guy is a student of some famous school because he has so much hidden skills. The demon realized that he could not just let him go, because then death would remain a matter of time for him. The monk continued to use the freezing spell on the opponent until he reached the city. He understood that this was not suitable and needed to come up with a way to distract the old one. The huge snake directed his gaze on the guards and threatened that if the guy flew again, then all residents of the city would be destroyed with him. The frightened men saw a huge monster over the gate and began to flee in different directions. The monk did not want to be at risk of civilians in this city, but he was unable to overcome this terrible monster. The man did not know how to do him, but exactly did not want to die at the hands of this meaningless snake. Chan San asked the monk why he was no longer running away and whether he really thinks he had a chance to win. He shouted that if a man still did not give up and continues to resist, he should thank God for being still alive. Suddenly, a stream of bright blue light appeared, which prevented the snake from fulfilling his intentions. The devil, known as the one who drove evil, asked the demon whether he lost his respect if he dared to attack without permission. Chan San did not expect the predecessor of 9 children. He did not understand what he was doing here. The serpent understood that this woman demon was too strong and even he would not be able to overcome it so simply. Tai turned to the boy and noted that he was really strong if he could escape from the paws of evil monster. He added that today he could not allow him to enter the city so that the residents do not die and apologize for the inconvenience. The dark monk dissatched in response that he was not going to go there. The official was angry because the guy dared to humiliate him in such a situation. Tai began to praise previous students for professionalism that the demons cannot be compared to them. Thus, he hinted that the latter also refers to the snake monster. The devil also started laughing at him. Their conversations were strongly angry with Chan San, so he shouted that today he would show them their true power. The figure of the man appeared near the body of the snake where there was a confused dark monk. After Chan San appeared in the hand of a clay plate, he prophesied the guy that is death day today. The monk felt that the stone bowl had the same aura as his Heikwan, which meant that this thing was also an ancient artifact. It was likely that she was even more powerful than his umbrella, so it was necessary to stop the spell to win. From the fingers of the demon into the clay plate began to flow blood. He said the guy that there was no point in resisting. Zhang Kui was not going to give up so easy. He grabbed the blade and kissed the saucer, trying to break it. However, the man did not have time to do this, and in the next moment, his whole body permeated the terrible aura. Chan San mockingly said that everyone who had to see his soul found themselves in the grave. The monk swung, shouting that he did not need his spirit and he would kill him physically. The snake demon reproached that under the action of an ancient artifact, his soul was even stronger than the body. All the sweaty dark monk began to run away from the giant viper that chased after him. The devil could be under this light thanks to the artifact. Considering the battle, she believed that the guy was doomed to death. Having replenished Zhang Kui, the snake asked if he could not run more faster, and he was too boring. He grabbed the monk in his arms and pulled him to his mouth, going to absorb his soul. Before that, the man had time to get an umbrella and tried to use it against the monster. The snake demon did not understand the point of using an ancient artifact in this situation. After using the umbrella, the surrounding space began to be filled with a dark fog. The dark monk was going to use the ability to win a little time for reflection. He was not quite skillfully using the artifact, so he could not move the umbrella at his request. The snake demon realized that it was just a distracting maneuver to win a little time. Zhang Kui was agitated because he saw that this darkness did not prevent the monster from seeing him. The snake shouted that this low-ranking ancient artifact could not do anything and went into attack. The dark monk tried to stop it using the freezing technique, which he opened recently. But the enemy was ready for it. He immediately released from the spell and shouted that the same thing would not work twice. The monk began to use everything in his arsenal and threw several devastating seals on the snake. But they just passed through his body without harm. The monster was ridiculous that even at the verge of death, a man uses cheap tricks. The demon went into the attack. The monk barely managed to stand. He had time to cover his body with a sword. After a moment, he rejected a few meters ago. His clothes broke into pieces, leaving a bare torso. The body of the man was covered with wounds and cuts. He still tried to decide what to do. The snake was going to attack again and shouted that this time he would definitely leave his opponent without his head. Suddenly, the monk remembered the unusual technique he had already used in one demon. At one time, to save the lotus, he sealed her soul in the flower, and in this situation, this skill could help him. A huge snake crawled closer, revealed his mouth, and was about to eat his opponent. Sometimes, Zhang Kui resorted to desperate tricks to solve a serious problem, but it did not always give the desired result. This time, the man tried to take the risk, put his hand forward, and applied the capture of the soul on the opponent. The body of the snake demon was silent. He did not understand what had happened and why he could not move. It turned out that this technique really worked, and the monk had a chance to win. The body of the man could not move, but his sword, as he could. So now the turn of the monk attack a demon. The snake believed that it would not work. Even if he could not move, it does not mean that the opponent would be able to kill him. A dark monk proudly said that invincible is just a word. The devil was happy that in one day she managed to see 2 artifacts. Tai excitedly announced the elder that the snake demon opposes Liu Gungo, so he cannot escape. The woman replied that she would not happen if the guy recognizes her as his baptized mother. Tai smiled, put his hands in front of him, bowed, and asked for the blessing of 9 children. The woman put her hand on his shoulder, leaned, and whispered for him to take good care of her baptized mother. Tai could not understand what she thought. Meanwhile, the giant snake disappeared, and Chan-san returned to his usual account for a moment. Already in the next moment his body was transformed, the limbs shared, and the body began to overgrown with snake skin. The couple on the mountain was surprised to watch it, not understanding what happened at all. And that happened. Chan-san lost, and a dark monk came out of the hellish battle. The devil turned to the spirits that flew around her and ordered them to attack the boy. The dark monk did not expect such a reason, but there was no choice. We need to defend. But he did not have time to do anything like little spirits with mocking faces enveloped his whole body. Tai and the devil were satisfied with this, wishing a dark monk faster death. Suddenly, the sun's rays began to be visible in the distance, and a bird's cry was loudly behind it. The predecessor of 9 children immediately realized that something was wrong. She saw that the master of Heavenly Tribunal would rush to them, grabbed Tai, and quickly rushed. All the wounded Zhang Kui saw a giant crane flew above his head. The bird's goal was caught by Chan-san, which after the monk's technique turned into a small snake. There was a true man, a darting defender on the crane. He asked the partner whether it was not a shame to steal toys and children. The bird replied that only ate the serpent bile, and he thought that the guy should not be greedy before them, and asked about it to assure. Zhang Kui said that he was not sorry for this annoying snake. The man knew that he was a famous Daching Guoqi, but thought his appearance would be more impressive. Residents and officials of Xingzhou in Haishui had stuck in a row and bowed to the great sage who appeared in their city. The old man looked at them and asked if they were called Paradise Observation Office. Zhou Duwei was very excited. Hearing this name, he reported that they were just performing their duties and stressed that he didn't understand what a great master wanted to say. The dark monk heard the roar of the hoof and saw that a whole detachment of people was approaching this place. Their leader was a eunuchin whom Zhang Kui had recently had to say goodbye. It has passed a few days from the moment of the battle. The events unfold in a hotel where the medicine received with incredible enthusiasm was praised by Lao Huan. Zhang noticed that the demon was going to the bottle, but he immediately explained that he did not want to pick it up, but simply wanted to look a little. The monk remembered how one blow destroyed all the corrupt strength of Haishuya and state officials of Liugungo, who were on the side of the heretics. They were all demon-stily executed on the streets, and these medicines were a small presentation for achievements. Huan asked the guy if he had never thought about joining the government, because with his abilities, it was possible to become influential very quickly. The current situation is quite satisfied with the monk. Perhaps it will change the point of view later, but not right now. Huan envied the guy because he has no attachment, but the poor old man is forced to fight for a peaceful place for his descendants. After the conversation, the demon said that it was time to go and left. The monk was just waiting for the moment when he would finally go. He grabbed the bottle and started pouring all the pill into his mouth. They increased his experience at times and did not need to hunt the monsters. Huan was angry watching this from the door gap, and he could not believe that the guy was not really afraid that his body would not withstand so much medication. Looking at the guy, the old man realized that things were bad because steam began to perform from his mouth. However, there was nothing to worry about. Zhang was only at the level of enlightenment, but there were so many strange things with it. Most shocked that he was not afraid of anyone. The demon suggested that the boy's relatives were 7 ancient creatures who, even compared to Mr. Zheng Guo, are considered to be the greatest and most powerful. Zhang Kui saw that the system changed its appearance. Now she looks like a starry sky, where every star was the ability of Di Shaw. He has 5 points of skills he got from Chan San, and now the guy was thinking about what to do with them. Suddenly, the master's master entered the room and greeted, emphasizing that they met again. Zhang knew that a person had great power in front of him. If Chan San was like a river that is ready to wear everything in its path, then this old man was like an ocean, incomprehensible and adamant. The master came to him with one business. He stressed that the guy is young and strong, and added that the people of his talent should not be forgotten. Zhang Kui did not quite understand what he wanted to say, and wondered if the old man had a task for him. Darking asked a man if he did not want to join him and visit an ancient secret. He began the story from the fact that there were 3 dynasties to the great price of our era: Zhou, Yu, and Prices. Each dynasty existed for thousands of years, but perhaps their people were even more powerful and prosperous history to these 3 eras. In the ruins, called Ancient Secret, there are places where traces of powerful creatures of the past are left. There was a separate space full of dangers, but also kept precious treasures called artifacts. The master was known that the monk knows what it is and should understand all the power of these attributes. Zhang realized that it was not just a dungeon where you can get ancient artifacts, but that there is much more dangerous than you can imagine. He remembered the horrible hand that came out of the cave. The man was aware that he had no choice, because he should eventually become stronger. And if this old man accompanies him, why not go on this trip? However, it was unclear to him why Darking's choice stopped at him. Suspicion of misleading began to go into the head. The monk replied that if it was a sincere invitation, he would gladly accept him. But he could not understand one unclear circumstance. Zhang asked why he was chosen, because he was not associated with the old one. So why does he take care of him? Darking asked the guy whether he worried that he would be used as a punch or as a gambling figure to open the way. On the full seriousness, the dark monk replied to the old man that he really had such suspicions. The master laughed loudly, saying that if he thinks, he is very underestimated. The race of people remained weak for a long time, and the old sages could no longer support the situation. The master said that in the future of the world, younger and stronger people needed, and pointing to the monk with his finger, said that he was his chosen candidate.